The Sorcerer, The Path to Transcendence starting from Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151 Assembly. As a member of SHIELD, he had to follow his superior's orders and do his utmost to safeguard the agency's interests. Lead the way, Wes didn't bother to argue. He knew no amount of words would help in this situation. Relieved, Coulson hurried ahead. The two boarded a state-of-the-art warship, which soared into the air like a giant steel bird. Less than an hour later, the warship slowly descended, landing precisely on a massive aircraft carrier. The intensely prepared scene aboard the carrier made it clear that SHIELD was ready for action. Every staff member was serious and bustling with activity, their weapons and equipment at the ready. We've been searching for any trace of the intruder, but so far, we've found nothing, Coulson said with a hint of resignation. Someone will lead the way for you. I need to pick someone up. With that, Coulson hurriedly left without disembarking from the warship. Soon, a beautiful red-haired woman approached. She was wearing a tight-fitting combat suit that perfectly outlined her perfect figure. Hello, I'm Natasha Romanoff. I'll be your guest. The infamous Black Widow underwent genetic engineering to become a super agent. Possessing strength far beyond that of an average person, coupled with her irresistible affability and stunning beauty, she became Nick Fury's trump card. Her fame had spread throughout the world, though not a good one. Although Natasha was beautiful, Wes harbored no ill will towards her. Those who looked down on her, focused solely on her beauty, became her prey. This is how she earned the nickname Black Widow. Hello, Ms. Romanoff, Wes greeted politely. Natasha sensed Wes had no ill intentions towards her, and felt a slight surprise. She knew Nick Fury's purpose in sending her to contact Wes, simply to exploit her beauty. Although she was deeply concerned about her companion Hawkeye's whereabouts, this was no excuse to stop her from completing her mission. Don't worry. Perhaps he doesn't like my style now. Natasha was confident in her beauty and incredibly patient, like a black widow weaving her web and waiting for her prey. Please follow me. Natasha led Wes on a tour of the aircraft carrier. A variety of advanced fighter jets were neatly arranged, displaying an endless array of yet-to-be-announced high-tech weaponry. Surprisingly, the carrier even carried nuclear warheads, demonstrating its formidable deterrent power. Just then, the entire carrier began to slowly ascend, rising from the sea's surface into the sky. Looks like everyone's here. Natasha led Wes to the conference room, where a crucial meeting was about to take place, determining the fate of Earth. As Wes entered, Tony's distinctive voice rang out. Wow, I didn't expect Mr. Magician to be interested in saving the world, Tony said, his tone tinged with teasing and surprise. Wes ignored him, casually finding a seat, as if nothing else mattered to him. Magician, Steve Rogers and Banner stared at Wes in surprise, their eyes filled with confusion and curiosity. Has the world changed so much? Even magicians have appeared, Steve asked in disbelief. Are you sure it's not a magician? Banner asked his own question. After receiving a positive answer, the two exchanged a look of shock. It seems that no one here is normal. This is that boy band you SHIELD want to form. It's completely lame. Tony's sharp tongue remained as sharp as ever, even to himself. His arrogant attitude and uninhibited words made the atmosphere in the meeting room tense. Get serious. This is a matter of life and death for the world, Steve said sternly, unable to tolerate Tony's nonchalance. His tone revealed a firmness and sense of responsibility, a stark contrast to Tony's casualness. Or will you beat me with your old-fashioned shield? Tony remained unbridled, his lips curled slightly in a provocative smile. One serious and solemn, the other unrestrained and imaginative, these two extremes naturally clash. Can such a team really save the world? Banner was filled with doubts, and he began to wonder if he shouldn't have come here. Just as Tony was about to continue spraying his venom, Nick Fury pushed open the door and strode in. I believe you already know each other. Nick Fury's voice was steady and powerful. Maria Hill, who was following him, handed out the documents in her hand, one for each person. Everyone flipped through them and looked at them. It contained everyone's basic information and areas of expertise. I think this will speed up your familiarity. Now is the urgent time. Nick Fury glanced around, but no one paid any attention to him. Wes didn't even open the document. After all, it wouldn't contain any important secrets. He sat there quietly, his eyes revealing a hint of indifference and indifference. Why does Mr. Magic only have a name and age? Don't you, SHIELD, claim that there is nothing on Earth that you don't know? Tony bluntly questioned SHIELD's unprofessionalism, his eyes tinged with sarcasm. Everything else is unknown and impossible to assess. Are you truly the most powerful intelligence agency? Tony's words pierced SHIELD's authority like a sharp arrow. Nick Fury's brow furrowed, his gaze darkening. Analysts can only infer his vast array of methods from just 2 instances, but isn't he sitting right here? Nick Fury's words carried a hint of resignation. He wished to learn more about Wes, but the current situation presented a thorny challenge. Everyone's gaze turned to Wes, a mixture of curiosity, scrutiny, and wariness. A complex web of emotions woven into the air, forming an invisible web. Nick Fury hoped to use everyone's pressure to pressure Wes, forcing him to reveal some flaws, or at least reveal some information. However, Wes simply raised his head and smiled, saying nothing. His smile held a mysterious air, making it difficult to interpret. For a moment, the atmosphere was awkward, and the meeting room fell into silence. Wes's indifference made Nick Fury seem like a joke, casting a pall over everyone. Chapter 152 A Mess. Wes, can I address you as such? Steve asked, his eyes filled with sincerity and anticipation. Wes turned to look at the man who had made a mark in American history, but he wondered to himself, even though America itself didn't have a long history, this man, heavily promoted by the US military, seemed like a saint. Sure, Wes didn't remain silent, his response clear and concise. Steve breathed a sigh of relief. A willingness to communicate was a good thing. He began his inspiring speech, emphasizing the need for unity in this critical moment to confront global threats. Wes applauded, but his words caught everyone off guard. Well said. Then, let's share SHIELD's secrets. Wes's eyes gleamed with a sharpness. Nick Fury hadn't expected the topic to turn to him. The object you're studying is called the Space Stone, Wes began, explaining. It's the most precious artifact in the universe, and the most powerful weapon. His voice was steady and powerful, clear to everyone. I could sense the energy fluctuations generated by your research on the Space Stone right here in New York, Wes scoffed. You thought your secrecy was flawless, that Earth's technology alone could prevent an advanced alien civilization from investigating? The energy fluctuations of the Space Stone are what attracted the aliens. To the aliens, they see this as a sign that Earth is preparing for war. Wes's words exploded like bombshells in the conference room. So it's you who attracted the aliens, you who started the war. You're incapable of resolving your own problems, yet you're asking others for favors, acting like it's your right, for the sake of humanity. Do you still have any shame? Wes spoke so much in a single breath, his words fierce and unrelenting. No one expected Wes to be so blunt, especially with such important information. Are you serious? Steve realized he'd been tricked by SHIELD, his eyes filled with shock and anger. Tony and Banner's faces darkened as they began to reassess SHIELD's actions. Ha, as expected, no agent speaks the truth. Banner stared at Natasha, his face filled with disappointment. Tony even hacked directly into SHIELD's system and discovered that Wes was right. SHIELD's research had indeed attracted the aliens. Nick Fury was on pins and needles. The person he had finally managed to get up was about to backfire. He regretted provoking Wes. This man seemed to know everything, putting his plans in jeopardy. Oh, calm down, everyone, Nick Fury said, trying to ease the situation. His reaction was indeed quick. He wasn't telling the whole truth. We didn't know we were researching that thing. It's the Space Stone, Wes corrected. Okay, it's the Space Stone. We didn't know researching the Space Stone would have such serious consequences, Nick Fury argued. So you admit SHIELD brought the aliens, Tony pointed out mercilessly. We just wanted to use the power of the Space Stone to better protect Earth. These aren't the first aliens to come, Nick Fury tried to defend SHIELD. So what? Faced with the ironclad facts, Nick Fury's excuses paled. Especially under the questioning of Tony, a man of both intelligence and eloquence, he nearly revealed even more secrets. Just as Tony was about to press further, Maria Hill rescued Nick Fury. Director, we've found the alien. Maria Hill's voice broke the tense atmosphere. Where is it? Nick Fury demanded. As if grasping a lifeline. Germany. We have to hurry. He could escape at any moment, Maria Hill replied. Everyone, now is not the time to assign blame. Earth's crisis will not be resolved until this alien is dealt with, Nick Fury declared. However, the conference room fell silent, no one responded. Finally, Steve stood up, looked at Nick Fury sternly, and said, "You owe me an explanation." "I will," Nick Fury replied firmly. "I don't want to stay here another second. You're polluting the air." Tony stood up and left, his face filled with dissatisfaction. "I don't think you need me," Banner said, wanting no part in this. Dr. Banner, we need you." Nick Fury tried his best to comfort Banner. Herr West chuckled softly and left the meeting room. His laugh was filled with sarcasm, as if mocking Schild's presumption. Only Nick Fury and Maria Hill remained in the room, their expressions grim. This meeting had not met their expectations, but had only exacerbated the situation. They needed to find a solution quickly, or they would lose control of these people. Steve changed into his signature combat uniform and boarded the fighter jet with impressive stride. Natasha expertly took the pilot's seat, concentrating on preparing for takeoff. Tony, still clutching a bag of snacks, wore a nonchalant expression, as if the impending battle wasn't a serious one, but a relaxing trip. Wes sat quietly in his seat, his expression calm. The fighter jet roared into takeoff, its powerful thrust causing everyone to lean back slightly. As the fighter jet gained altitude, the scenery below shrank, the city's outline gradually blurring. What the hell is wrong with this world? Steve questioned his soul, his eyes filled with confusion and bewilderment. We defeated Germany, and the Red Skull was there to avoid war. Why is America now the one starting the war? Steve's voice tinged with anger and disappointment. Haven't they learned anything? He pondered, but couldn't find the answer. Steve, Wes suddenly spoke, you have to understand that the only lesson humanity has learned from history is that humanity doesn't learn from history. Wes's words were simple yet profound, striking Steve like a hammer at the heart. Steve wanted to argue, to defend human progress and change, but in the end, he was speechless. He had to admit, while the words were cruel, they held some truth. Humanity had repeated the same mistakes throughout history: war, conflict, greed, selfishness. These problems seemed to never be completely resolved. Steve sank deeper into confusion, unsure if the beliefs and values he held on to still held true. Chapter 153 Shocking point. Male protagonist. Like a flash of lightning, the fighter planes crossed a vast Atlantic Ocean and arrived in Germany. Tony and Steve quickly began battle preparations, their faces etched with seriousness and focus. The alien threat was imminent. No matter who had provoked it, the reckoning would have to wait until later. At this moment, they had only one goal in mind: resolving this crisis. Loki stood among the crowd, enjoying the mortals' kneeling obeisance. A quiet sense of satisfaction rose in his heart, filling him with pride and arrogance. No, not enough. What if those kneeling were Asgardians? Loki's ambitions went far beyond the mere atrium. His goal was to conquer the entire 9 realms. He firmly believed that he was the true king, not just some old man who could only wield a hammer. This is just the first step. Loki looked down at the kneeling mortals, his heart filled with pride. I will eventually become king. The roar of engines echoed from the sky, and Loki's lips curled up. Finally, you've made me wait so long, damn mortals. Steve descended from the sky and delivered a speech about human rights and freedom. Tony, however, thought he was talking too much and activated his suit's weapons system, aiming at Loki. Loki raised his hands in surrender without hesitation. The two brought Loki back to the fighter, but they couldn't quite put their finger on it. Everything was going too smoothly, so smoothly that it was unsettling. Steve and Tony anxiously questioned Loki's origins, but Loki remained smiling and sat quietly, as if he weren't the one being held captive. The position seemed to shift, with Loki appearing calm and composed, while Steve and Tony were somewhat bewildered. Tony, impatient, tried to force Loki to speak, but Steve stopped him. Seeing the two men about to argue again, Wes separated them and stood before Loki. Welcome to the atrium, Prince Loki. Wes's voice was calm and steady. Loki raised his head and looked directly at Wes. Do you know me? Of course. In the 9 realms, your name isn't as famous as your father and brother, but the title of the God of Trickster is equally widespread. Wes's response startled Loki. Hearing Thor mentioned, Loki's face darkened. As a native of Midgard, knowing all this, who are you? Loki's tone was filled with caution. Wes Erwin, a wizard. Wes introduced himself. A wizard? When did Midgard have wizards? Loki was surprised. It seems the God King hasn't told you everything. Earth is very dangerous. Wes's words lingered with a hint of mystery. HMPH, Loki snorted disdainfully. Just as he was about to taunt Wes, thunder rumbled. Loki suddenly tensed. What? Are you afraid of thunder? Why don't you go back to your mother's arms and cry for a while? Tony's venomous words were delayed but still made Loki's face darken even more. Bang! It felt like a tremendous force had struck the top of the fighter plane. The fighter plane jolted violently, leaving a startling dent. It was as if struck by a giant's fist, deeply sunken, the warping and deformation of the metal clearly visible. Then, with a sharp, piercing squeak, the solid door of the fighter plane was forcibly ripped open from the outside with unparalleled force. A towering, muscular blond man slowly squeezed in. Clad in medieval armor and clutching a warhammer, he exuded an air of authority and inviolability. His target was clear, Loki. With firm, powerful steps, he strode towards him. Seeing this, Tony and Steve rushed to Loki without hesitation, stopping the uninvited visitor. Stop, they stared intently at the intruder. However, Thor gave a gentle push. Tony and Steve felt an irresistible force surge through them, sending them flying like two light leaps. They slammed heavily into the wall of the fighter plane, making a dull thud. Then, Thor mercilessly yanked Loki by the collar, glaring at him with a rage that seemed to penetrate Loki's soul. The two stared at each other, silent. Then, Thor grabbed Loki, turned, and flew away, instantly disappearing from everyone's sight. Tony slowly rose from the ground, his face filled with anger and resentment. Damn it! What happened to that guy from the explosive point just now? His voice was filled with irritation. When had he ever suffered such a loss? He quickly donned his suit. I'll make him pay, Tony vowed to himself. Tony, wait a minute, we need a battle plan, Steve shouted hurriedly, his face filled with worry. I have a battle plan. Plan A, Tony replied, his voice brimming with confidence. What? Steve was confused, completely confused as to why there was a Plan A attack, Tony said, and he took off like an arrow from a bow. Natasha, follow, Steve shouted anxiously. He quickly found a parachute and jumped in without hesitation. Natasha glanced at Wes, expecting him to offer some instructions, but instead, Wes simply floated up and slowly flew away. This action infuriated Natasha, who slammed the steering wheel furiously. What self-centered assholes, Natasha complained in her mind, a look of resignation on her face. When Wes arrived, he saw Tony knock Thor away. Loki was still listening, as if awaiting some important news. However, the moment he saw the idiot brother being knocked away, he nearly laughed. A schadenfreude at gloating crossed his face, but he quickly regained his composure. Seeing Wes, Loki instantly assumed a godly air, attempting to project his authority. You don't seem worried about your friends, Loki said tentatively, trying to find a flaw in his response. Friends? I'm not friends with them, Wes replied simply and decisively, without a trace of hesitation. Wes's answer piqued Loki's interest, and he began to study Wes. You're quite interesting. Would you like to be my subordinate? Once I rule the 9 realms, Loki began to promise Wes a promise, tempting him with power and status. Impossible. Odin will never let you rule the 9 realms. You're not his biological child. These words, like an incredibly sharp arrow, instantly pierced Loki's heart. He knew this, but being exposed so bluntly by an outsider still stirred a fierce murderous intent within him. Loki's smile remained, yet within it lay a hidden danger. Just as he was about to strike, Tony, Steve, and Thor, seemingly concluding their conversation, returned together. For the greater good, Loki decided to spare Wes' life. Chapter 154 Hulk. Back on the helicarrier, Loki was imprisoned in a maximum security, transparent cage. The cage, meticulously crafted by SHIELD's technical department, was supposedly impenetrable. However, Nick Fury, Tony, and other intelligent individuals keenly realized that Loki had willingly allowed himself to be captured. Confused, they pondered Loki's motives, but they could never grasp the reason. Undeterred, Nick Fury tried to morally blackmail Wes and Thor into revealing their secrets. However, all he received was Thor's scorn. Without Asgard's protection, Earth would have been destroyed long ago. Your so-called SHIELD is a joke. Thor's words were filled with arrogance and disdain. Tony, annoyed by Thor's condescending attitude, was about to retort when Steve discovered a weapon SHIELD had crafted using the power of the Space Stone. He angrily confronted Nick Fury, arguing that his actions were no different from those of Germany during World War II. The conference room erupted in chaos, a cacophony of arguments and accusations. Even Wes, who knew the reason beforehand, was affected, becoming even more aggressive than before. Boom! A resounding roar echoed as the helicarrier came under heavy attack. Alarms blared throughout the ship. The sudden attack instantly brought everyone back to their senses. Is this the power of the Mind Stone? Wes pondered, gazing at the blue gem on Loki's scepter. Everyone had guessed Loki's intentions. He was using the Mind Stone to sow suspicion among the people, then annihilate them all. Being intelligent, they quickly put aside their grudges, realizing that driving the enemy off was the most important thing. So, everyone began to split up. Wes had planned to stand aside and watch. However, that fool Thor had been tricked by Loki, imprisoned in a cage, and then thrown from 10,000 meters. Without someone to restrain the Hulk, the entire helicarrier would be destroyed. Wes, who had been planning to watch Natasha's Beauty and the Beast performance, was instead targeted by the Hulk. His keen intuition revealed I was the more threatening one. Wes couldn't help but sigh as he faced the Hulk for the first time. It was undeniable that the Hulk was incredibly intimidating. His massive frame and furious glare would have frightened any ordinary person to the point of wetting their pants. Stop sighing. Stop him. Natasha was now in a state of panic. She had exploited the complex terrain of the helicarrier to narrowly escape the Hulk's grasp. One of the helicarrier's engines had been damaged, and much of its internal equipment had been damaged. The helicarrier began to plummet towards the sea, its sheer size terrifying. A plunge from 10,000 meters into the ocean would be a near impossible outcome. While Tony was trying to restore the power system, Steve helped him hold the enemy back, buying him time. While Wes had no good feelings towards SHIELD, he wasn't so cold-blooded as to watch thousands of people plummet to their deaths before his eyes. So, he cast a levitation spell. Instantly, the helicarrier's descent slowed. At full power, Wes could keep the helicarrier stationary. However, he still had to save his magic to deal with the giant before him. Roar! The Hulk roared, a deafening roar that was terrifying. Like an enraged beast, he charged at Wes. Seeing this, Wes swiftly waved his wand, transforming the smooth road in front of the Hulk into a swamp. The Hulk's foot sank in, and he instinctively tried to pull it out, but it only sank deeper. Finally, he landed on the next level. Then, with a single leap, the Hulk smashed through the barrier, the force of which twisted and shattered the metal partition. Wes curled his lips. If it were on the ground, getting out wouldn't be so easy. The Hulk's rage intensified, his eyes blazing with fury. He clapped his hands together, creating a powerful shockwave like a surging ocean wave, instantly sending the surrounding fighter planes flying. The shockwave toppled the fighters, sending them crashing into the wall with a dull thud. Fortunately, the people on this floor had already fled, otherwise the consequences would have been disastrous. Weiss waved his wand, and a flash of light appeared, easily neutralizing the shockwave. Several freezing spells quickly struck the Hulk's chest, and the frost instantly spread, threatening to freeze him into an ice sculpture. However, the Hulk slapped his chest with a powerful palm, shattering the frost with a powerful force, sending shards flying everywhere. High magic resistance, Weiss thought to himself. Without holding back, the black fiery flame erupted like a surging tide. Wherever it passed, everything turned to boiling iron, melting the metal floors and walls, emitting a pungent odor. The Hulk seemed to sense the terrifying heat of the fiery flame, and he hesitated for a moment. Then, surprisingly, he dodged. The Hulk, or the Hulk, was Dr. Banner's alter ego. He was constantly angry, but that didn't mean he was stupid or clueless. Wes controlled fiend fire to fly above the Hulk's head, transforming into drops of black rain. How could the Hulk, with his massive size, possibly dodge them all? The raindrops landed on him, instantly burning his skin and sending plumes of black smoke billowing. Burns covered his body, yet the next second, they began to heal, powerful defense and regeneration. Wes marveled. The pain infuriated the Hulk, his already massive size growing even larger, his strength increasing with it. With the rain cascading down his head, he charged directly at Wes at lightning speed. A single punch, so powerful it pierced the helicarrier through the air, sending the wind howling in. Not seeing Wes, thinking he'd been killed, the Hulk grinned and, like an excited gorilla, pounded his chest with a muffled thud. However, he didn't see Wes standing right behind him. His perception was weak. A single illusion deceived him. Wes pointed his wand at the Hulk's feet. The Hulk instantly sensed the danger, but it was too late. His feet were empty, and Wes used a spell to directly shatter his foothold and shattered all the layers below. The Hulk fell directly from the helicarrier, and his huge body fell like a meteorite. Hulk, Natasha lay on the side, shouting with a worried look on her face. "Don't worry, this guy has thick skin and flesh, and he won't be killed by falling from such a height." Wes threw down a word and turned away. Due to the limitations of the terrain, Hulk was defeated by Wes before he could exert his full strength. But Wes knew that the Hulk's strength should not be underestimated. If they were on the ground, it would be hard to say who would win and who would lose. Chapter 155 Whale. Loki's raid was a resounding success. After the attack, SHIELD barely managed to restore its power systems, but it had already lost most of its operational capabilities. A heavy atmosphere permeated the entire helicarrier. The damaged equipment and casualties cast a pall over everyone. Morale among Tony and his companions was utterly low, and they fell into deep self-doubt. Once brimming with confidence, they now questioned their own abilities. However, Nick Fury, with his foresight, cleverly used Coulson's death to galvanize the group. Coulson had always been well-liked. His kindness, bravery, and loyalty deeply impressed everyone. His death, along with a looming crisis, struck the group like two hammers, shaking them from their self-doubt and forcing them to rally. Tony, with his exceptional intelligence and analytical skills, quickly determined Loki's location. It seems narcissists all think alike. Donning his tattered suit, Tony was the first to fly back to New York. The others boarded the remaining fighter, this time with Hawkeye at the controls. Having been controlled by Loki, Hawkeye had committed a grievous mistake, now filled with guilt and remorse. He vowed to stop Loki and atone for his mistakes, even at the cost of his life. Wes wondered what it felt like to be controlled, but now was clearly not the right time to ask. When the fighter arrived in New York, the skies were densely packed with Chitauri troops. These half-mechanical, half-biological aliens loomed like a dark cloud over the city, a chilling sight. Tony was also thrown from Stark Tower by Loki. However, the newly developed tracking feature of his armor saved him. While falling, he quickly donned his suit and flew back into the air. Upon reaching the others, he shared the latest intelligence, giving them a clearer understanding of the current situation. Dr. Banner trudged his way onto the battlefield on his motorcycle. The first generation of Avengers had arrived. As for Wes, he never considered himself a member of the Avengers. He wasn't that great. He had his own selfish motives for coming to New York. To outsiders, the sanctuary of the Holy Sanctuary in New York looked like a perfectly ordinary building. However, this place was not only a crucial node in the Earth's defenses erected by the Ancient One, but also a nexus between the multiverse and the supernatural. The Ancient One stood quietly on the rooftop, gazing at the wormhole in the sky. Her eyes were deep and serene, as if she could see through everything. Weiss drifted over, his figure lithe and graceful. "Long time no see, Sorcerer Supreme," Weiss's voice tinged with respect. The Ancient One turned his gaze to him. "I already know your purpose, so?" Weiss asked. "The future holds countless possibilities, even Vishanti cannot fathom them." The Ancient One's words were filled with profound meaning. Weiss understood the Ancient One's meaning, and with tacit approval, he felt free to worry. After Weiss left, a gentle, weakened version of the Hulk appeared. But none of this concerned Weiss. The war had begun, and all of New York was plunged into chaos. It wasn't just the Avengers who fought the Charada. New York street heroes, militias, military, police, gang members, and even ordinary citizens rose up in resistance. In this life-or-death situation, everyone cast aside past differences and united in a united front. With courage and conviction, they defended the city and their home. However, humanity's outdated weaponry was ineffective against the Charada. Countless Charada swarmed through the wormhole, invading New York like a tide. These were merely the vanguard of the Charada army. If Loki used the Space Stone to fully open the wormhole and the main force descended on Earth, the consequences would be disastrous. Not only New York, but the entire Earth would be ruthlessly enslaved. The only solution was to defeat Loki and force him to close the wormhole. However, at that moment, the Avengers were completely trapped by the Charada army, unable to intervene. "Wizard, where's Wizard? We need help," Tony shouted anxiously into the comms channel. He was being pursued relentlessly by a whale-shaped mechanical creature. The creature, a terrifying beast, its massive body the size of a mountain, moved swiftly through the air, stirring up gusts of wind. Tony repeatedly changed direction in mid-air, trying to escape its pursuit, but the creature was relentless. Despite their massive size, these creatures were incredibly agile. Their bodies were covered in a variety of weapons, including energy cannons that flashed dangerously, sharp spikes, and blades that gleamed coldly. Over New York City, these creatures could easily destroy buildings, leaving devastation in their wake. Tony was being pursued closely, nearly desperate. Just then, Wes's voice echoed through the Avengers' ears like a heavenly voice, "Leave these whales to me." The whales were numerous, and they were the Charity's most potent weapons for sieges and plundering cities. American military weapons were powerless against them, making it difficult to inflict any significant damage. However, Wes had his own plan. Gravity spell quadruple. As Wes chanted this spell, several nearby whales instantly felt a surge of pressure. They plummeted from the sky with a resounding crash. Their massive size and various weaponry made them incredibly heavy. Quadruple gravity was too much for even their power systems, which far surpassed Earth's. The whales slammed heavily onto the ground, sending up clouds of dust and shaking the surrounding buildings. Wes's magic temporarily relieved some of the pressure on the Avengers. "Well done," Tony's excited voice suddenly echoed over the comms. In this fierce battlefield, everyone felt like they had received a shot of adrenaline, their exhausted bodies instantly filled with strength. Steve's voice also came through the headset, a hint of eagerness and anticipation. "Wes, how many times can you cast this spell?" Steve's words betrayed his concern for the current situation and his anticipation for Wes's magic. "At least dozens of times," Wes understated. His voice was steady and powerful, conveying a sense of reassurance. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156 Experiment. Great, Steve's excitement was clear through the headset. His voice was filled with joy and excitement. "Drive these whales to one location and let Wes handle them," Steve quickly gave the order, his tone decisive and resolute. Upon hearing Steve's command, everyone sprang into action, skillfully guiding the massive and ferocious whales in a specific direction. The process was fraught with challenges, as they had to evade the whales' attacks while ensuring they reached their designated destination. But they remained steadfast, their single conviction, to fight tooth and nail for the future of Earth. Steve commanded more than just the Avengers, his communications system also connected to the U.S. military. A large portion of the military grew up listening to Steve's stories. His legendary experience, like a shining star, illuminated their path. At least half of them were inspired by him to join the military and fight for the good of their country and its people. Now, being able to fight alongside the legendary Captain America and follow his command was something only dreamed of. Every soldier felt an indescribable excitement surge, as if their entire bodies had been energized, filled with endless fighting spirit and strength. Dozens of enormous whales were collectively herded to the evacuated neighborhood. The area was now remarkably empty and silent, as if awaiting the approach of a storm. Without hesitation, Weiss apparated, appearing in the center of the block in an instant. Gravity spell 8x, a powerful magical force instantly enveloped the entire area. The whales fell from the sky like dumplings, creating a deafening roar. However, the price paid was that the entire neighborhood was also affected by gravity, leaving not a single building intact. But it was all worth it. To stop the Charity attack and protect Earth, this sacrifice was insignificant. The Charity commander was no fool. He quickly noticed the changing situation and ordered the whales to disperse as far apart as possible. At the same time, another large force was dispatched to pursue Weiss. The Vanguard's whales were crucial weapons, and losing so many in one fell swoop severely hampered their offensive. The Charity have spotted Weiss. The battle plan has changed. Steve, perceptive to the shifting dynamics on the battlefield, spoke with a calm and decisive voice. "Thor, go stop your brother. Tony, help him clear the obstacles." Steve's exceptional commanding abilities were on full display at this moment. He made swift decisions, adjusting his strategy to respond to the ever-changing battlefield situation. "Wes, do you need help?" Steve asked with concern. Weiss gazed at the Charada army, dense as a locust swarm. "I can handle it," he replied succinctly and forcefully. Steve breathed a sigh of relief. Every troop was crucial now. The fact that Weiss didn't need help gave him some relief, freeing him to focus on commanding other areas of the battlefield. To conserve his magic power, Weiss mounted his modified broom. His flying skills far surpassed those of a Quidditch player. After all, he simply had no interest in Quidditch, no talent. Weiss deftly controlled his broom, weaving in and out of the Chita army like a swift swallow. He skillfully guided the Chita army into Central Park, still lush and green, a tranquil oasis amid the clamor of battle. Riding his modified broom, Weiss darted into a grove of trees with lightning speed. The lush foliage of the trees intertwined, forming a natural green dome that obscured Weiss's path. The Chita army pursued him relentlessly, their metallic forms gleaming coldly in the sunlight. Like a surging tide, their flying vehicles surged into the woods. To their surprise, however, Weiss paused. "Idiot," Weiss muttered, a hint of cunning in his voice. His voice, soft but clear in the stillness of the trees, was heard loudly. Then, with a resounding boom, a massive mushroom cloud rose into the air. A powerful shockwave instantly swept through the forest, uprooting trees and sending branches flying. The intense flames and heat made the air around them seem to ignite. The Charada army, along with the forest, was instantly reduced to ash, metal debris scattered everywhere. The curved shape of the trees is quite useful. Weiss's true form quietly appeared in another place not far away. The one that had just slipped into the woods was only his clone, who had cleverly used it to lure the Charada army into a trap before delivering the fatal blow. He had just experimented with a magic he had acquired from Fairy Tale, and the results had pleased him greatly. He watched countless Charada swarming through the city like a tide. "Seems like a good experiment." Weiss's lips curled up slightly, his eyes gleaming with excitement. He surveyed a densely packed Charada army. Having initially planned to just sit back and relax, he now decided to step up his game. Weiss instantly transformed into a mobile turret, darting across the battlefield, his wand waving relentlessly as dazzling, colorful spells streaked across the sky like meteors. Fire magic instantly reduced the Charada soldiers to ash, ice magic froze them into ice sculptures, and lightning magic shattered them. Weiss experimented with various magical techniques, his creativity and imagination fully unleashed. He pursued the Charada army, crushing them wherever he went. The previously arrogant alien creatures fled like frightened birds. Though Weiss's action was unintentional, it further bolstered the morale of the human side. Ordinary citizens and soldiers, witnessing Weiss's heroic performance, cheered him on. Their faces lit up with hope and joy as they cheered him on. In their eyes, Weiss was a hero who had saved them. However, in the eyes of others, Weiss's danger level skyrocketed. "Keep a close eye on him. Don't miss a second," Nick Fury barked orders to the technicians. Lou Dan worried that if Weiss's power went unchecked, it would bring even greater disaster to Earth. To keep track of Weiss's actions, he even resorted to using a military satellite to record every detail of his actions. The technicians worked feverishly, their eyes glued to the screens, not daring to slack off. Chapter 157, What You Want. As Wes was getting excited, Nick Fury's voice suddenly reached his ears. It was rapid and serious, like a thunderclap exploding in his ears. "Watch out, a nuclear bomb is heading your way. Watch out, a nuclear bomb is heading your way. Watch out, a nuclear bomb is heading your way." He repeated something crucial 3 times, each repetition tinged with endless tension and worry. Steve couldn't believe his ears. His eyes widened, a look of shock and anger on his face. They'd fought bloody battles on the front lines, giving their all to protect Earth and humanity, only to be stabbed in the back by their own people. "Assholes," Steve cursed angrily, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white from the strain. "Why? We've already suppressed the aliens." His voice was filled with confusion and indignation. Tony, always known for his sharp tongue, remained silent. Just as everyone was sinking into despair, Thor delivered good news. "We can close the wormhole now." These words, like a ray of light in the darkness, instantly gave everyone hope. Tony suddenly had an idea. "Breaking news. Buy me some time." He then flew towards the missile carrying the nuclear bomb. The missile hurtled towards New York, leaving a long streak in the sky like a wound of despair. The artificial intelligence, Jarvis, quickly helped Tony plan the optimal route. Just as in the original storyline, Tony, carrying the nuclear bomb, relentlessly charged into the wormhole. Soon, all the Chitauri soldiers were paralyzed, as if the power had gone out. The moment the wormhole closed, Tony fell through space. However, this time, the Hulk didn't need such a brutal rescue. Wes quickly cast a levitation spell and steadily placed Tony on the ground. The Avengers gathered around him, their faces filled with concern. Wes silently made room for them and watched them gather around Tony. Unnoticed, Wes quietly entered Stark Tower. A few minutes later, a fully armed SHIELD team appeared inside. They were escorting a high-tech looking box to the top elevator. Wes's target lay within that box. The elevator descended smoothly, then suddenly, without warning, stopped. The men inside were instantly on guard, their eyes wary, their muscles tense, ready for any possible danger. The elevator door slowly opened, and when they saw Wes standing outside, they instinctively pointed their guns at him. "Give me the thing," Wes commanded, his tone unwavering. A bald man with glasses reached out to press his gun, stopping his men's impulsive actions. "Mr. Erwin, this item is dangerous and must be handled by SHIELD, the bald man spoke sternly. Wes didn't know the bald man's name, but he knew he was a member of Hydra, a dangerous element hidden within SHIELD. "Sir, what are you doing with it?" Wes didn't bother to listen to the man's nonsense. With a gentle wave of his hand, a powerful force surged out, knocking the men unconscious. The box fell to the ground with a dull thud. Wes walked over quickly. Alato, with a single unlocking spell, the tightly sealed box opened. Inside, quietly, lay Loki's scepter. Wes picked up the scepter and gently stroked the shaft. The delicate touch filled him with an inexplicable excitement. He gazed at the blue gem at the top, which radiated a deep, captivating light, holding endless mysteries. So beautiful, Wes couldn't help but admire. Just then, Wes suddenly sensed someone behind him. He turned around and saw Steve standing behind him. However, this Steve was deeply exhausted, his face filled with vicissitudes and helplessness. "Did Thanos snap his fingers again?" Wes asked tentatively. "You really knew all along?" Steve, presumably the future Steve, had a complicated expression. "I thought the Mind Stone would be safe in my hands." Wes was suspicious, and various thoughts raced through his mind. Could it be that Thanos has captured me in the future? "I only know that you offered the Mind Stone to Thanos," future Steve said gravely. "So that's how it is," Wes guessed, something, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Wes, for the sake of everyone in the universe, please give me the Mind Stone," Steve said, almost pleadingly. "I know no one can stop you if you want to, but this is our last hope. I don't think resurrecting half the dead is a good idea, but I know you won't give up," Wes sighed. "Never mind. I was moved by your story before, too." Wes handed the scepter to Steve. "Thank you." Steve took the scepter and vanished in an instant. Less than a second later, he reappeared, handing the scepter back to Wes. "Steve," Wes called out. Steve turned, unsure why Wes had called him. Wes hesitated, unsure what to say. "Anyway, thank you, Wes," Steve said, then vanished again. Wes carefully put the scepter away. He walked out of Stark Tower calmly, slipping away quietly under everyone's gaze. The people around him bustled about, some frantically preparing for the aftermath of the battle, others reeling from the shock and exhaustion of the intense battle that had just concluded. No one paid him any attention. A short while later, Wes returned to his potion shop. He gently closed the door, shutting out the clamor and chaos of the outside world. Inside the quiet shop, he unsheathed his scepter, his movements gentle and focused. He knew what lay ahead, the furious pursuit of SHIELD, perhaps even the overwhelming pressure of the entire United States. Yet, his face remained devoid of any worry. In his heart, the value of the Mind Stone far outweighed any potential risks. It was worth his antagonism to the United States. For Wes, the Mind Stone would undoubtedly be a vital aid in his quest to explore more worlds. Of the 6 Infinity Stones, it was undoubtedly the one most suited to him. Compared to the other stones, its power better suited Wes' abilities and needs. The Mind Gem can not only provide Weiss with powerful spiritual support, but also integrate with his magic to produce even more amazing effects. Chapter 158, Mind Gem. In the world of Harry Potter, magic emphasizes confidence and determination. In that fantastical world, casting magic isn't just about chanting spells and waving wands, it's also about demonstrating inner strength. It's a power that stems from deep within, a belief in and dedication to magic. Only when wizards possess unwavering faith and resolute resolve can magic unleash its mighty power and create awe-inspiring miracles. In fact, regardless of the world in which magic unfolds, its fundamental pursuit is a single, unwavering goal: may your wishes come true. These four seemingly simple words hold the deepest meaning of magic. Magic may manifest and follow different rules in different worlds, but its core goal remains the same: to transform our desires into reality. Whether through mysterious spells, powerful instruments, or pure spiritual power, magic's ultimate goal is to fulfill our innermost desires, allowing dreams and aspirations to blossom in the real world. It's a power that transcends reality, a power that can break convention and create miracles. The Mind Stone, one of the fundamental principles of the Marvel Universe, possesses power that is truly limitless. This mysterious gem is like the heartbeat of the universe, its every flicker imbued with immense energy. The scepter, once used by Loki, acts as a limiter, limiting the Mind Stone's power while also protecting its wielder. The Mind Stone's power is immense. Without proper restraint, its wielder could easily be consumed by its violent force. The scepter's material is mysterious and powerful. Although Weiss doesn't know its exact composition, it must be the finest in the universe. It can withstand the Mind Stone's immense power while also trapping some of it, allowing the wielder to control the stone's power to a certain extent. Otherwise, those like Loki and Weiss wouldn't be able to withstand the overwhelming force and could be instantly destroyed by the stone's power. When I can wield the Mind Stone directly, Weiss thought to himself. He imagined himself mastering the Mind Stone's power and becoming one of the most powerful beings in the universe. No, he quickly dismissed the thought. When I can give up the Mind Stone, Weiss lost himself in a reverie. He believed that day would come. Then, he would no longer rely on the Mind Stone's power, but instead, draw on his own strength and wisdom to become a truly powerful being. Weiss began to study the Mind Scepter's uses. In his view, using the Mind Stone to control others was sheer folly. Such an act would not fully unleash the Mind Stone's power. Weiss took up the scepter and used magic to attempt to communicate with the Mind Stone. The process went smoothly, unhindered. Thanos was so overconfident that he hadn't even left any backup plan in the scepter. This undoubtedly facilitated Weiss's efforts. The Mind Stone glowed faintly, responding to Weiss's call. A shower of petals fell in the shop, a beautiful scene that felt like a dream. Weiss opened his arms, embracing the magical scene. He harnessed the Mind Stone's power to cast magic, creating something out of nothing, truly influencing reality with his mind. This was a realm countless magicians and wizards aspired to. With the power of the Mind Stone, Weiss had achieved it. Ha ha ha, Weiss laughed, his laughter filled with joy. Weiss threw himself into studying the Mind Stone, immersing himself in its mysterious power, seeking to uncover its hidden uses and unearth its endless potential. Meanwhile, the outside world was in turmoil over his affairs. In a tense meeting room, Nick Fury's face darkened as he declared sternly, he must surrender the scepter. This isn't just SHIELD's demand, it's the Security Council's. Something this dangerous can't be left in the hands of someone who's not under their control. Is it safe in your hands? Tony mercilessly exposed their true thoughts, a hint of mockery in his eyes. Can you guarantee he won't be able to control others? Tony's sharp and direct questioning left Nick Fury speechless. We can't do that, Nick Fury tried to defend himself. His words were weak and feeble. He had long since lost his credibility with these superheroes. His past actions had left them no longer trusting SHIELD and the Security Council. Steve sat silently, speechless. Thor and Banner had departed at the end of the war. Thor took Loki back to Asgard to face the God King's judgment. Banner vanished from everyone's sight once again. Come on, you'd better focus your energy and time on rebuilding New York, Tony said impatiently, rising to leave the meeting room. He was too busy to stay and argue with Nick Fury. New York lay in ruins, rubble everywhere. The once bustling city was now a wreck. Tony had invested heavily, mobilizing his own resources to help the homeless rebuild their homes. He had too much to attend to and didn't have time for pointless arguments. Steve might not have Tony's wealth and resources, but as a symbol of Americana, his mere presence on the scene was inspiring. He threw himself into the reconstruction effort without hesitation, personally contributing to the work. His energy seemed boundless, as if he could replace an entire construction team. Countless people were inspired by his actions and joined the rebuilding effort. The construction industry in the Marvel Universe seemed to be on a roll. Workers toiled day and night, rebuilding the ruins piece by piece with sweat and effort. New York, fresh from the war, was revitalized by its people's collective efforts. The familiar streets and skyscrapers gradually reappeared, and the city's bustle and energy slowly returned. New York City was bustling again, as if the terrible war had never happened. After a long period of seclusion and research, Weiss finally decided to get some fresh air. His mind had been on high alert from his long hours of immersion in the Mind Stone, and he desperately needed to experience the outside world and relax. As he slowly pushed open the long-closed door and walked out with a somewhat lazy gait, the scene that greeted him instantly brought his mood to a slump. Chapter 159 After the War. Because standing there was a black-boiled egg, Nick Fury. The moment Wes saw Nick Fury, the slight pleasure he'd felt at the prospect of enjoying fresh air vanished without a trace. Wes's face darkened, his eyes gleaming with displeasure, his tone as hard as ice as he spoke coldly. "I have nothing to say to you, hand over the thing, and you won't see me again." Nick Fury's words carried a hint of threat, attempting to coerce Wes into submission. Unmoved, Wes simply walked past Nick Fury. "The thing is already mine. If you want it, just grab it from me." Wes' voice was filled with confidence and defiance, and he met Nick Fury's gaze fearlessly. "Asshole, do you even know what you're doing?" Nick Fury's face darkened even further, his voice thick with anger. "Of course I know." Wes glanced at Nick with disdain. "But are you prepared?" "Prepared for what?" Nick Fury's frown deepened, not understanding the implication of Wes's words. "Prepared for war, of course. A war between me and you." Wes's voice was resounding and powerful. The surrounding agents tensed, their hands gripping their weapons tightly, their eyes filled with vigilance. However, without Nick Fury's order, no one dared to move. Wes simply walked past them. The agents could only watch him leave, daring not to move. Nick Fury led the agents in retreat. Undercurrents surged within SHIELD, and the Hydra forces hidden within it became active. "This is our opportunity. Provoke a conflict between the Wizard and Fury. Using the Wizard's hand, we can eliminate those loyal to Fury. Then we can easily take control of SHIELD." In a secret room, Alexander Pierce, a Hydra mole who had infiltrated SHIELD, gathered his subordinates. They sat together and discussed how to deal with Wes. Brock Rumlow said bitterly, "It's best to capture the conceited wizard and brainwash him, turning him into a tool for our service for the rest of his life." Having suffered 2 consecutive defeats at the hands of Weiss, and his arrogant attitude, the self-important Rumlow grew jealous. "Crossbones, don't bring your personal feelings into this mission. Wizards aren't so easy to capture alive," Pierce sternly reprimanded Brock Rumlow. After Pierce's rebuke, Crossbones quieted down, lowering his head and falling silent. "Our forces are still very weak. Once we control the entirety of SHIELD and reborn through a shell, that's when we can really show our strength." Pierce's eyes gleamed with ambition. "Boss," suggested the bald Sitwell, "we could ask for help. After all, Hydra wasn't limited to their undercover branch within SHIELD for decades. Hydra had infiltrated the entire world." Pierce considered the idea and rejected it. Although they were all members of Hydra, they didn't manage each other. Asking for help from those forces would come at a price. It wasn't time yet. He didn't want to reveal his strength too soon, nor did he want to owe anyone a favor. Everyone knew that during the heart-stopping Battle of New York, a mysterious wizard wielded miraculous magic, defeating numerous aliens with astonishing power. However, while the wizard's deeds were widely circulated, few actually knew what he looked like. After all, in the chaos of battlefields, surviving was a blessing. As for the government and military, they were even less willing to actively help Weiss spread the word. On the one hand, they might be wary of unknown forces and want to avoid overemphasizing the uncontrollable power of magic. On the other hand, they also had their own political considerations and interests, unwilling to allow an uncontrollable individual to become the focus of public adoration. Nevertheless, the public was filled with curiosity and admiration for this mysterious wizard. On the streets of New York, children dressed as wizards could be seen everywhere. They wore black pointed hats, wielded homemade wands, and even rode brooms, imitating their heroes. In toy stores, wizard action figures and toys filled the shelves, along with merchandise featuring other Avenger members, captivating children's attention. Televisions also broadcast related cartoons, vividly depicting the wizard's magical powers and heroic deeds. Weiss strolled leisurely through the streets of New York, his gaze slowly scanning the surroundings. The streets were bustling with people and traffic, and everything seemed to have returned to its former bustle and hustle. Watching all this, Weiss couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion. Humans are truly resilient creatures. Faced with a sudden alien invasion, the world was plunged into panic and chaos. Cities were destroyed, lives were taken, and people's lives were completely disrupted. Yet, in a short period of time, people gradually began to accept this harsh reality. Undeterred by fear, they bravely stood up and began rebuilding their homes. Children ran happily through the streets, their faces filled with innocent smiles. These small figures are the hope of the future. They rushed to dig out their allowances, excitedly buying superhero merchandise. The exquisite action figures and cool toys captivated the children. Even the candy wrappers were emblazoned with images of the Avengers. Wes had to admire the acumen of the capitalists. At any moment, they were able to quickly seize opportunities and turn public enthusiasm into tangible profits. It seems I haven't received any copyright fees. Should I sue them for infringement? This thought suddenly popped into Wes's mind, nearly making him laugh. He shook his head and continued his aimless walk. Wes wandered the streets of New York until a familiar voice called out. "Wes, can we talk?" Wes turned to see Steve. "I don't have anything to do right now." Steve took Wes to Brooklyn, where he was born and raised. Although most of the people and things he once knew were gone, Steve still loved being here. Every street and every building here held memories and emotions. "You're a New Yorker, too," Steve said. "I guess so. I haven't been here often since I was a kid, so I'm not as familiar with New York as you are." Steve smiled brightly. "I know a good restaurant." Chapter 160 Prelude. Along the way, Steve's tall, imposing figure stood out. Passers-by's reactions varied. Some nodded their heads slightly, expressing their respect. Others instantly transformed into frenzied fans, screaming excitedly, their faces beaming with joy. They quickly gathered around, each pulling out pens and paper to request Steve's autograph. Others eagerly raised their phones or cameras, eager to take a photo with Steve and capture this unforgettable moment. Just then, a bold girl, her face blushing, stepped forward. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at Steve with anticipation. "Steve, can you join us for the party?" The girl's voice was clear and melodious, tinged with a hint of nervousness and shyness. However, Steve smiled gently and politely declined her invitation. "I'm sorry, I have something to do right now and can't join you. I hope you enjoy yourself." After dealing with these frenzied fans, Steve led Wes down a secluded lane. Away from the bustling crowd, the path felt exceptionally peaceful. Steve's voice, now resuming conversation, was remarkably clear in the quiet. "I heard you were an orphan," Steve apologized. "Sorry, I'm just curious how you managed to leave New York and live alone at that age." A magic school accepted me," Wes said casually. "Are there really magic schools?" Steve's eyes flickered with surprise. "Of course, I wasn't born with magic," Wes replied with a smile. The two walked into a dated restaurant. The moment they stepped inside, they felt as if they had stepped back into the 1970s and 1980s. The decor was full of retro charm, wooden tables and chairs, faded photos, and antique chandeliers. Everything evoked a sense of time. The overall atmosphere was warm and inviting, relaxing. It was clear that Steve was a regular. The moment they entered, the staff immediately smiled warmly and greeted him. Some staff members greeted him warmly. "Steve, it's been a while since we last saw you." Others jokingly joked, "You brought a new friend today." The customers around him simply nodded, accustomed to his presence. "You must try the apple pie," Steve enthusiastically recommended, as if it were a rare delicacy. Wes, observing Steve's enthusiasm, nodded with a smile and ordered one according to Steve's order. Soon, the food arrived. Wes picked up his cutlery, cut a piece of the pie, and slid it into his mouth. Instantly, the rich aroma of apples filled his mouth, a mellow and lingering aroma that made him feel like he was transported to an apple orchard. The pie had just the right sweetness, not overly sweet, yet still allowing for the natural sweetness of the apples. Wes savored it carefully and couldn't help but admit that it was indeed delicious. "Very good," Wes praised. Hearing Wes's praise, Steve was even happier than the chef, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. It was already 2 in the afternoon when the two of them arrived, a time when the restaurant was usually quite empty. They sat in a quiet corner, savoring the moment of peace. As time passed, other customers gradually left. By the time they finished, their table was the only one left. The restaurant was remarkably quiet, The only sounds were the soft clinking of cutlery and the murmur of their conversation. "Just say whatever you want to say." Wes looked at Steve, knowing he wouldn't just treat him to a meal. Steve paused for a moment, then asked, "That scepter?" Wes replied without hesitation, "Indeed, I have it." Steve asked expectantly, "Can't we both compromise?" Wes shook his head firmly, "No way." Steve sighed helplessly, knowing there was no way this situation could be undone. "Steve, let me give you a piece of your mind. SHIELD and this country are not worth your life," Wes said in a serious and earnest tone. With that, he stood up and walked out of the restaurant. Before leaving, he glanced back at Steve and said, "Tell them I won't hold back." The resolute look and decisive words made Steve sense Wes's resolve. Steve sat quietly, watching Wes's retreating figure, his heart filled with helplessness and worry. He knew a conflict was inevitable. Wes slowly walked out of the restaurant. The moment he stepped out, his keen intuition instantly alerted him to the presence of more than a dozen pairs of eyes fixed on him. Those vague gazes, like ghosts in the darkness, though cleverly concealed, still couldn't escape Wes's perception. "You can't hold back so quickly?" How impatient, Wes thought to himself, his lips curling up slightly in a subtle sneer. He pretended not to notice them and casually walked out onto the street. His pace was unhurried, like an ordinary pedestrian enjoying the afternoon sun. Those watching Wes trailed cautiously behind, their movements extremely cautious, trying not to attract Wes's attention. Judging by their movements and tracking techniques, each one had undergone rigorous professional training. Their steps were light and steady, their eyes focused and alert, constantly monitoring Wes's every move. They alternated between scattered and clustered, their coordination seamless, evidently the product of long hours of practice. Yet, to Wes, they were laughable. Their tracking techniques, to him, were as childish as child's play. Find a place to finish them off, Wes decided silently. The bustling New York streets weren't the ideal place for action, the constant flow of people would cause unnecessary trouble. So, Wes wandered further and further away from the bustling city. Finally, he arrived in Clinton, better known as Hell's Kitchen. It was New York's most chaotic and dangerous district. The streets were filled with an oppressive atmosphere, the dilapidated buildings crumbling, the walls covered in graffiti and stained with grime. Even the police were reluctant to patrol the area, as it was overrun with gangs and crimes were happening every minute. The people who live here feel as if they've been abandoned by the world. The New York City government even treats this place as if it doesn't exist. Reconstruction is progressing slowly, relying entirely on the painstaking efforts of Hell's Kitchen's own people. Ruins and broken walls are everywhere, testament to the countless violence and destruction this place has endured. Chapter 161 Reward. Weiss calmly walked into an abandoned building. The dilapidated walls were covered in mottled scars, and the window glass was mostly shattered, leaving only sharp fragments swaying slightly in the wind. Sunlight streamed through the broken windows, casting slanting beams of light through which dust particles danced slowly. The men who had been targeting him slowly emerged from the shadows, their figures blurring in the dim light. "He spotted us," one of them whispered, a hint of surprise and unease in his tone. Not surprising. Without that kind of strength, how could he deserve such an outrageous bounty? "What do you say?" someone else asked, a hint of hesitation in their voice. These dozen or so men were a team of mercenaries. They had experienced many dangerous missions together, possessing a tacit understanding of teamwork and rich combat experience. "Let's go all out. Once we finish this job, we won't have to worry about the rest of our lives," a burly mercenary said through gritted teeth. "That's right. We'll retire after this job," another mercenary echoed. The high bounty had the mercenaries enticed, as if they envisioned a future of luxury beckoning. However, they weren't unprepared. Several of them quickly dispersed and began scouting the surroundings. Several of them found a commanding position on the higher floors opposite. A fully loaded pickup truck slowly approached, its engine roaring loudly against the silent street. It stopped near the building, and the mercenaries quickly peeled back the tarpaulin, revealing a vast array of advanced weaponry. HKG-36C short assault rifles, AWP sniper rifles, PKM general-purpose machine guns, and advanced drones were neatly arranged. One mercenary expertly flew a drone into the building, searching for Wes. The drone's propellers emitted a gentle hum. Two snipers quickly took up the high ground, adjusting their scopes and intently observing the building's entrances and windows. The others donned their tactical vests, checked their weapons, and cautiously entered the building. Even with only one enemy, they remained extremely cautious, taking every step with extreme caution, fearing even the slightest sound. The drone operator reported to his teammates, "The target is on the 5th floor. It seems he's spotted me," but before he could finish, the voice died. "What's going on? Call back," the captain urged anxiously, his voice strained through the headset. However, no matter how hard the captain pressed, there was no response. "Tom, Jack, have you seen anything?" the captain anxiously asked the two snipers occupying the commanding heights. "Captain, we haven't seen anything," the snipers replied, their eyes filled with confusion. A bad feeling welled up in the captain's heart, and he began to hesitate. Should he continue advancing or retreat? The question swirled in his mind. Wes slowly descended, his footsteps resounding clearly in the silent building. A dozen gun barrels instantly pointed at Wes, the dark muzzles emitting the aura of death. Looking at the weapons in their hands, Wes laughed. "You know nothing. If they were SHIELD, their weapons would be even more advanced." Seeing Wes's impudent attitude, the captain knew he'd messed with the wrong person. Superpowers were no longer a secret. Those possessing them often possessed immense strength, far beyond the reach of mercenaries like them. "Can you spare my life?" the captain dropped his gun. A hint of pleading in his voice. Wes hadn't expected this man to be so tactful. He felt embarrassed to attack. The captain told the mercenaries to put down their guns, then pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket and eagerly tried to light one for Wes. Seeing this familiar gesture, Wes was speechless for the first time at being tricked by a mere mortal. "Where did you learn that from?" Wes asked. "I had a teammate who was from Dragon Country, and I learned it from him," the captain replied respectfully. "Tell me about it." Wes took the cigarette, but didn't smoke it. Seeing Wes accept the cigarette, the captain's heart suddenly relaxed. "Well, it's like this," the captain began. Someone had issued a bounty, offering a whopping $300 million. There was only a photo and a name, no other information. This caused a stir in the mercenary world and assassin organizations. Such a high bounty was unprecedented, and countless assassins, mercenaries, and gangsters were all excited and flocked to New York. They had just finished a mission and were taking a short break. While wandering around, they stumbled upon Steve. One of the team members happened to be a big fan of Steve. As they happily interacted with Steve, their eyes flickered to Wes, standing next to Steve. So, they followed Wes. The bounty was issued by SHIELD, Hydra, the U.S. military. Weiss wielded the scepter, and the news left many sleepless nights. They knew the scepter's power to manipulate minds, and they understood the implications of Weiss wielding such a powerful weapon. To them, Weiss was like a bomb waiting to go off at any moment, filling them with unease and worry. These mercenaries were mere cannon fodder. To the forces behind the scenes, these mercenaries were merely pawns to test Wes's strength. "You go, okay, when you get out, spread the word I'm here, okay?" The captain didn't dare ask why, he simply obeyed Wes's orders respectfully. After evacuating the building with his men, someone in the team couldn't help but ask, "Captain, are we just going to let it go?" The captain glared at him and said, "Can't you see they're showing mercy?" The team member, still a little unwilling, muttered, "Is that pretty boy really that powerful?" The captain sneered and said, "Haha, are Iron Man and Captain America powerful?" The team member fell silent. He was of course aware of the power of Iron Man and Captain America. "He's also a superpowered person," the captain added. "The captain is a wise man, he's figured out the key. They're merely tools being used by those forces behind the scenes, and now, they must get away from this troubled place as soon as possible. Hurry up. I have a feeling something big is going to happen here." The captain's tone was filled with tension and uneasiness. A dozen people squeezed into a dilapidated pickup truck and left Hell's Kitchen in a panic. Chapter 162 I'm a Bad Namer. News of Wes's presence in Hell's Kitchen spread like a raging storm, spreading through the underworld at astonishing speed. The message even included precise coordinates. Suddenly, the shady New Yorkers were all stirred to action by this sudden news. No one who had survived the underworld was foolish. They all knew full well that the $300 million bounty was no easy task. The target either had a formidable background, imposing imminent retribution on those who attempted to meddle, or possessed immense power, easily crushing those who overestimated their capabilities. Judging by the current situation, the latter was more likely. Some who still retained their composure, after careful consideration, decisively abandoned this seemingly tempting but inherently dangerous mission. They understood that life was far more precious than wealth, and that they could not risk their lives for the sake of fleeting greed. However, many others were blinded by the high bounty, their greed overtaking them like wild weeds. "I've got a damned life, let's give it a try and turn my bicycle into a motorcycle." Some gritted their teeth, their eyes gleaming with madness, as if they could already see the wonderful life they'd enjoy after becoming rich overnight. What if I get lucky? Others clung to a glimmer of hope, clinging to an unrealistic fantasy, hoping for a stroke of luck. Some of these unwilling and hopeful individuals formed makeshift teams, looking out for each other and trying to increase their chances of success in this perilous adventure. Others, completely confident in their own abilities, stood alone and proud among the crowd, exuding absolute confidence in their own abilities. From all corners of New York, these people poured into Hell's Kitchen like a tide. Their figures crisscrossed the dim streets, the cacophony of footsteps and the clash of weapons shattering the otherwise tranquil atmosphere of Hell's Kitchen. The actions of the New York underworld were so deceptive that even the NYPD, New York Police Department, couldn't hide them from SHIELD, let alone the Shield. "Are these people crazy?" the NYPD commissioner roared angrily as he watched the crowd pouring into Hell's Kitchen on the security screen. To prevent these people from causing a disturbance in New York, the NYPD urgently recalled all officers. Sirens wailed throughout the streets of New York as officers rushed to their posts, faces trembling with anxiety. The officers breathed a sigh of relief when they saw the crowds entering Hell's Kitchen. They quickly deployed officers to establish a one-way lockdown, restricting entry to Hell's Kitchen but not exit. As for the residents of Hell's Kitchen, what about them? They were already in hell, so how much worse could the situation get? As night fell, darkness enveloped the city like a vast curtain. The abandoned building was surrounded by a crowd of people, each of them a formidable presence. Some were burly and heavily built, while others had cold, chilling eyes. They wielded a variety of weapons, pistols, rifles, submachine guns, and even a bazooka. Finally, someone, overcome with anxiety, took the lead and entered the building. Seeing this, the others hurried to follow, fearing that if they fell behind, they would lose out on the tempting bounty. Around the building, spies from various intelligence organizations were already in place. SHIELD, Hydra, the CIA, the FBI, and other unnamed secret organizations. Like ghosts lurking in the darkness, silently watched all that unfolded. They weren't there for the bounty, but to broadcast the events live to their superiors, awaiting their orders. Weiss remained quietly on the 5th floor of the building, his gaze shimmering with soft light, like loyal guards, dispelling the darkness. The flickering candlelight cast mottled shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere of mysterious tranquility. Sensing movement downstairs, Weiss slowly raised his head from his book, his eyes etched with a hint of indifference. "With so many people, how many can even reach me?" Weiss murmured softly to himself. Then he lowered his head again, returning his attention to the book in his hands. To him, these small fry were far less appealing than the book in his hand. As soon as the assassins entered the 1st floor, they felt a wave of dizziness, as if the world were spinning. The sudden discomfort sent them into panic, and before they could react, at least half of them rolled their eyes and collapsed to the ground, dead and silent. "What's going on?" someone cried in terror, their voice filled with anxiety and fear. "Damn it, they're all dead," another roared in despair. Despite their panic, the remaining people maintained a basic level of sanity. They quickly formed a circle, back to back, and vigilantly observed their surroundings. Weiss had set up a magic circle on the 1st floor. This circle had a special effect: it launched a mental attack. If the average person's mental strength was 1, only those with a mental strength of 1.5 could withstand this attack. Those who couldn't withstand it were naturally killed instantly. What ordinary people couldn't see was that the souls of the deceased were being collected by a mysterious lamp. "Get out. This place is awful," someone cried in terror, their voice echoing harshly in the silence. Terrified, they began to regret their greed, having risked coming to this horrific place for the hefty bounty. But while getting in was easy, getting out wasn't. Weiss had already set up a barrier, allowing entry but not exit. They were trapped by an invisible shield, and no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't break through. Some fired, but the bullet struck the shield, sending only faint sparks but failing to penetrate it. Some even used bombs, their devastating explosions echoing through the enclosed space, but the shield remained unmoved. "FK," someone cursed angrily, feeling utterly hopeless and helpless. "He's forcing us to go up," another cried in despair. The remaining people exchanged glances, seeing the fear in each other's eyes. However, they had no other options. In this desperate situation, they could only unite and search for a glimmer of hope. From the outside, nothing was happening in the building. It was so quiet that it was a little scary. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163, Man-Eating Building. What's going on? Nothing. The bounty hunters and assassins surrounding the building looked at each other, bewildered. They stared intently at the seemingly ordinary yet mysterious building, trying to discern a clue from its silence. Many more expressed a deep fear, sensing that things were far from as easy as they had imagined. Over 100 men stormed into the building with overwhelming force, yet not a single splash emerged. The building was like a vast black hole, silently swallowing all who entered. A huge reward always calls for courage. The underworld is full of desperate individuals willing to sacrifice their lives for the sake of money. Soon, another group of over 100 bravely stormed the building again, but the result was the same, silence and no sound. Seeing this, fear gradually spread to some, who gave up and quietly retreated from this dangerous place. While they were all desperate men, they didn't want to die in vain. In the end, the once bustling crowd was reduced to just a few dozen. These men were no ordinary people. They possessed some extraordinary abilities, each possessing immense confidence. At that moment, a bald, broad-shouldered man emerged. He wore an expensive suit, its crisp fabric and exquisite tailoring a testament to his status and position. He was flanked by a coterie of underlings. He was the kingpin of New York's underworld, Kingpin. He certainly wasn't there for the bounty. He ran a vast business empire, and wealth was no longer his goal. With such a grand event happening in the New York underworld, he naturally had to attend, demonstrating his status and influence. Whoa! Kingpin exhaled a puff of white smoke, which slowly drifted through the air, as elusive as his thoughts. Still haven't found out who posted the bounty. His voice was deep and powerful, carrying an undeniable authority. No, replied a man with a bullseye tattooed on his forehead. He was one of Kingpin's assassins, nicknamed Bullseye. His eyes were cold and sharp, like a blade poised to be unsheathed. Kingpin narrowed his eyes. There are only a few organizations in New York I can't find any information about. I can't investigate any further. He pondered this, knowing full well that this bounty might be fraught with danger. Looking at Bullseye, eager to try, Kingpin advised, give up. Your target isn't just any ordinary person. How can you know if you don't try? Bullseye's tone was filled with confidence and stubbornness. He was a top-tier assassin, absolutely confident in his abilities. With that, he entered the building without hesitation. As the others watched Bullseye enter, their agitation grew. Those with a fierce confidence in their own abilities, their competitive spirit and greed ignited, and they followed without hesitation. However, as soon as they entered the building, they felt a sledgehammer strike their heads, a powerful pain surging through them. They were under a psychic attack, an invisible force surging through their brains like a tidal wave. Those who couldn't hold on quickly lost consciousness and fell to the ground, joining the numerous bodies. The remaining people exchanged a horrified glance, quickly realizing they were under a psychic attack. In their minds, psychic attacks were among the most difficult superpowers to counter. They launched without warning, making them impossible to defend against and even difficult to effectively defend against. A wave of despair surged through them. Yet their instinct for survival kept them calm. Charge forward, engage him in close combat, someone shouted. They believed that only by engaging him in close combat could they avoid further psychic attacks. Gritting their teeth, they rushed to the second floor. However, upon reaching the second floor, they were met with a shocking scene. Bullseye fell to his knees, struggling to move forward. Pain etched across his face, sweat dripping down his face. Everyone was filled with confusion. They soon felt as if something heavy weighed them down, weighing them down, unable to lift their backs. Their legs trembled, unable to support themselves. There's something wrong with the gravity here, someone said with difficulty. They were filled with fear, unsure of who their target was, and how he could possess such terrifying powers. Retreat, retreat to the first floor, someone shouted in panic. However, it was too late. Gravity began to double. Everyone was pinned to the ground, unable to move. Their breathing grew increasingly labored, every muscle and bone groaning in agony. They struggled desperately, but to no avail. In the end, they lost their lives in despair. What a poor bunch. They didn't even make it to the second floor. Weiss sat on the fifth floor, his expression clearly filled with disappointment and boredom. He glanced down at the book in his hands, seemingly losing interest in reading any further, and gently closed the page. Weiss slowly stood up, his movements neither hurried nor slow. As he walked down from the fifth floor, Weiss couldn't help but feel a sense of regret. The traps and tests he'd meticulously laid on the fourth and third floors now seemed completely wasted. He hadn't expected these people to be so vulnerable. Reaching the second floor, he was met with a sea of shapeless corpses. Their twisted postures clearly showed the agony of their final struggles. Perhaps in their final moments, they felt despair and helplessness, but it was too late. Weiss's eyes lingered briefly on the bodies, without a trace of pity, only a sigh of weakness for their frailty. Arriving at the first floor, it was completely silent. The dead didn't have any scars on their bodies, they died peacefully without experiencing too much pain. Perhaps at the moment of death, they didn't even realize what had happened. Wes walked out of the building, and at that moment, everyone's eyes were instantly focused on him, as if drawn by a magnet. He looked around, and whenever his eyes fell on someone, everyone would swallow nervously. The tension was like being a prey targeted by a wild beast, full of fear and uneasiness. Even the underworld boss Kingpin was no exception, and a subtle hint of tension flashed across his usually calm face. This is the instinct of living things, to fear the existence that can take their lives at will. And Wes, at this moment, was undoubtedly the existence that made everyone afraid. Chapter 164 Continental Hotel. No one dared to meet Weiss's gaze. Enveloped by his overwhelming aura, everyone lowered their heads. Those eyes, once fierce, cunning, or greedy, now dared not even twitch, fearing to attract Weiss's attention and bring about calamity. "You're so boring. I thought you had some special tricks up your sleeve." Weiss's voice was quiet, but it reached everyone. Disappointment was evident in his words, as if he was deeply dissatisfied with their performance. He spoke not just to the people before him, but also to those behind the scenes. Weiss knew full well that the person who had posted the bounty was surely keeping an eye on the situation. "You've already taken action, which means the war has begun. Be prepared, I'll find you soon." With these words, he left without a backward glance. Everyone watched Weiss's retreating form, and they involuntarily made way for him. They were like tamed sheep, afraid to disobey a lion. "It looks like something big is about to happen," someone whispered, their voice filled with unease. Everyone felt the pressure of impending disaster, a tense atmosphere thick in the air, making it hard to breathe. In Washington, at the White House, the Black president angrily asked his staff, "What does he mean by that?" The president's face darkened. He knew full well that Wes's words contained a profound threat, one that could have unforeseen consequences for the nation. "Sir, he means he won't find the person who put the bounty on him," the staff replied cautiously, a slight tremor in his voice. "Pa!" The Black president slammed his hand on the desk, a resounding sound that echoed throughout the room. "I don't need you to translate," the president roared, his frustration reaching a fever pitch. "Tell Nick Fury nothing will happen again on my watch." The president's tone was firm and resolute. He still wanted to run for re-election. "Yes, sir." The staff quickly contacted SHIELD to convey the president's request. On the top floor of the Triskelium building at SHIELD headquarters, Nick Fury sat in his office. Wes's words played on the screen before him. His face darkened, as if a heavy stone weighed on his heart. He couldn't help but curse inwardly. "Moxxer fuxxer. Who on earth is putting out this bounty?" This is such a thorny issue. He hadn't prepared for a fight with Wes yet, and now everything seemed caught off guard. "Natasha, what's the situation?" Nick Fury anxiously asked his subordinate. "Director, the wizard is heading towards the Continental," Natasha quickly replied. Nick Fury looked puzzled and surprised. The bounty was sent through the Continental. Should we stop him? Nick Fury fell into deep thought. He had long been looking for an opportunity to remove this troublesome thorn in the Continental, but he had been thwarted from all sides, ultimately leaving it unfinished. After careful consideration, Nick Fury finally made a decision. "No, we just need to clean up the mess and avoid any further complications." Wes took a taxi to the Continental Hotel. Its ornate exterior was truly magnificent. However, strict regulations prohibited the entry of ordinary people. It provided intelligence, weapons, and a resting place for assassins. When Wes arrived at the hotel entrance, the gatekeeper reached out to stop him. But the moment his eyes met Wes's, he froze involuntarily. He then obediently opened the door for Wes and said, with a hint of flattery, "It's a pleasure to serve you, sir." As Wes entered the hotel, a capable waiter immediately greeted him and said respectfully, "Mr. Irwin, our manager wants to see you. Lead the way," Wes said expressionlessly. The waiter led Wes into the VIP room. A middle-aged man, exuding a strong aura of superiority, had been waiting there for a while. Upon seeing Wes enter, he tried to offer a polite greeting, "Nice to meet you," but Wes abruptly interrupted him and asked, "Name?" The middle-aged man's outstretched right hand froze awkwardly in the air, his expression instantly stiffening. He seemed unprepared for Wes's directness and rudeness. "I don't think Mr. Irwin knows that the Continental Hotel is merely a service platform," the middle-aged man tried to explain. But Wes had completely lost his patience. He didn't bother to listen to his rambling nonsense and stared directly into his eyes. Lyrics. The middle-aged man felt as if countless needles were pricking his head, a splitting headache. He cried out in fear, "What have you done?" The Continental Hotel was merely following orders from its European headquarters. He watched as Wes completely ignored him and pressed the alarm. As the alarm blared, the entire Continental Hotel instantly entered a state of high alert. All doors and windows were quickly sealed, transforming it into a completely sealed fortress. Weiss exited the VIP room. Everyone in the hotel, customers, servants, and ordinary staff, held their guns pointed at him. What they failed to notice was an oil lamp floating in the air, its wick igniting a tiny flame. Then, everyone in the hotel suddenly erupted in strange flames. These flames could not be extinguished by ordinary means. They tried everything, water, fire extinguishers, but to no avail. Their bodies, like wood engulfed by flames, were quickly reduced to charcoal, and the air was filled with a pungent, burning smell. These people know nothing, and even in Europe, they might never find the person behind the bounty. Weiss pondered as he left the Continental Hotel. He understood that those within the Continental Hotel were merely pawns, knowing little about the true mastermind behind the bounty. If he rashly headed for Europe, he'd likely be lost in the dark, running around like a headless chicken, ultimately unable to find the mastermind hidden in the darkness. In this world, I've only ever had conflicts with SHIELD and Hydra. He couldn't help but wonder if this bounty was the work of SHIELD or Hydra. But he didn't dare jump to conclusions, as other unknown forces might be involved. He looked up at the sky, as if seeking inspiration. Finally, he made up his mind, let's go to Washington. Chapter 165 Hydra. The news of hundreds of assassins' deaths in a single day shocked New York. Such an event was unprecedented, and its horrific severity plunged the NYPD into a state of extreme activity and chaos. The department's supply of body bags was rapidly depleted, nearly reaching a critical mass. Resources previously reserved for handling more common cases were now diverted to this unexpected incident. Simply handling the bodies of these assassins kept the police busy. They carefully carried each cold body, their faces etched with exhaustion and frustration. Fortunately, however, the New York gangs had become remarkably docile under the Kingpin's strict control. Kingpin, with his keen sense of smell, sensed something was afoot. He knew that at this critical moment, any rash action could bring disaster upon himself. Not wanting to be retributed later, he decisively restrained his men and ensured that the entire gang maintained a low profile. "Boss, bad news. The wizard has gone to Washington," Natasha reported the disturbing news to Nick Fury with a hint of nervousness in her voice. Upon hearing this news, Nick Fury felt a surge of unease. The worst has happened. He's suspecting us. "Check which flight he's on," he commanded urgently. "He's not on a plane." Natasha's response only deepened his confusion. Nick Fury's face was filled with confusion. Surveillance footage shows him in a flying car heading towards Washington, but neither satellites nor radar can lock onto his location, Natasha explained in detail. Nick Fury fell silent, his mind racing through various possible responses. His heart was heavy at the moment, knowing that the situation had become extremely complicated. "I hope this doesn't spiral out of control," he prayed silently. Washington, as the capital and political center of the United States, is home to the nation's core institutions of power, and many of America's top figures have chosen to reside there. In this special place, everything that happens is magnified by countless eyes, scrutinized and interpreted from every angle. If Wes caused the disturbance there, the consequences would be unimaginable. The political stability of the entire country could be severely impacted, triggering a chain reaction that would be incalculable. While Washington, D.C., appeared calm on the surface, security had been secretly heightened. Senior officials were equipped with extensive security detail, and their movements were subject to tighter protection. SHIELD, the FBI, the Secret Service, and other key security agencies were mobilized, sweeping the entire city like a tight net. However, despite the massive investment of manpower and resources, no trace of Wes could be found. It was as if Wes had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace. After a busy day, Pierce dragged himself wearily back to his residence. He enjoyed a moment of peace and comfort with his family over dinner. After dinner, he retreated to his study, preparing to continue his mountain of official business. As he opened the door, his pupils constricted. A surge of unease welled up within him, but years of political experience quickly calmed him. He twirled his wedding ring ever so slightly, a small gesture that brought him some strength and comfort. "Want a drink?" Pierce said, pouring 2 glasses of red wine and handing one to Wes, who sat in a chair. Wes sat there leisurely. "Alexander Pierce," Wes asked slowly. "It's me. I wonder what Mr. Irwin wants to talk to me about." Pierce tried to keep his tone calm. "You don't know." Wes's tone was tinged with doubt. "All I know is that you eliminated hundreds of assassins in New York, and now all of Washington is under martial law because of you," Pierce replied calmly, stalling for time as much as possible, pondering a response. "I don't know why you're looking for me. I'm just an old man who has retired to the sidelines." Pierce tried to downplay his role, to lessen Wes's suspicions. Wes smiled, then suddenly said something that shocked Pierce. "Hail Hydra!" Pierce's eyes widened, his face filled with disbelief. "You? Of course not." Pierce's expression twisted, his mind racing. "How did you know that?" "Oh, you have the scepter." He blamed the scepter for Wes's knowledge of his secret, believing it must have granted Wes some special ability, allowing him to discover his identity. "Since you know Hydra, you must know the power we wield." Pierce's eyes gleamed with a fanatical glint as he began to entice Wes, his words filled with temptation. "Join us. With you and the power of the scepter, we can easily control the entire world. Imagine the magnitude of that achievement. You'll have endless power and wealth, becoming one of the rulers of this world." In Pierce's eyes, there was no way Wes would refuse his invitation. After all, who could resist such a temptation? He was convinced that if Wes had any common sense, he would realize that joining Hydra was his best choice. "Idiot." Wes's voice was soft, but it made Pierce's mind buzz. "What?" Pierce's eyes widened, his face filled with disbelief. He suspected he had misheard. The answer was completely unexpected. "Rule the world? You Hydra guys aren't qualified yet." Wes crossed his legs, his demeanor relaxed and his expression dismissive. He felt as if the ambitious man before him didn't realize the world had undergone earth-shattering changes. The coming era would be a stage for superheroes and supervillains. Hydra was, at best, a supporting role, their ambitions seemingly insignificant and ridiculous in this new era. "Asshole, you actually look down on us." A surge of intense anger welled up in Pierce. As a high-ranking member of Hydra, he had always been full of confidence and pride in his organization. Now, Wes's contempt filled him with immense humiliation. If he hadn't been unable to defeat Wes, Pierce would have attacked him long ago. He clenched his fists tightly, trying to suppress his anger, ruin his reputation and make him have no place in this world. Pierce secretly thought to himself. Chapter 166 18-Man Team. A convoy of dozens of SHIELD armored vehicles arrived like a torrent of steel, their engines roaring like the deep roars of wild beasts, shattering the night's tranquility. The vehicles quickly fanned out, surrounding Pierce's house in a tight, impenetrable formation. The armored vehicles gleamed with a cold metallic sheen, their advanced weaponry emanating a chilling aura, ready for battle at any moment. Several fighter jets hovered in the air, their weapons locked firmly on Pierce's villa, poised to strike at the slightest sign of movement. In his study, Weiss sat quietly, allowing SHIELD to proceed without a trace of resistance. His face was expressionless. "Are they SHIELD or are they from Hydra?" Weiss's voice was calm, yet it carried an invisible pressure. Pierce pursed his lips tightly, remaining silent. His mind raced with the response. "Forget it, you've become so intertwined that I can't tell you apart." Flustered footsteps echoed from the first floor. Pierce's wife knocked anxiously on the study door. Her voice held a hint of fear, but more so, concerned for her husband. "Honey, take the kids and leave first." Pierce's voice was steady and resolute. He knew the situation was extremely dangerous and that his family's safety was paramount. There was a pause outside, and then a voice called out, "Okay, be careful." As the wife of an agent, she was calmer and more rational than most. She knew now was not the time for sentimentality. They had to get the children out of this dangerous place as soon as possible. Nick Fury, holding a megaphone, shouted into the room, "Wes, calm down. Pierce has nothing to do with this." His voice echoed through the air, filled with anxiety and worry. "How you're quite capable. Boiled egg, who's so suspicious, didn't even suspect you." Wes's laughter was filled with mockery. Tricking Nick Fury, the king of agents, was one of Pierce's greatest triumphs. Pierce had chosen Boiled Egg since he was just a regular agent and had supported him throughout his career. Nick Fury's rise to power mirrors the evolution of Hydra's encroachment on SHIELD. Pierce meticulously planned and strategically orchestrated, gradually propelling Nick Fury to a higher position while simultaneously allowing Hydra to infiltrate and expand within SHIELD. He prided himself on his strategies and tactics. Seeing Wes completely ignore him, Nick Fury frowned, his unease growing. He knew he couldn't continue in this stalemate, so he resorted to violent assault. With a creaking sound of machinery, a special unit slowly emerged from an armored vehicle. This unit consisted of only 18 members, each meticulously selected. Each of them, chosen from among the best agents, was truly the cream of the crop. They possessed not only exceptional physical fitness and combat prowess, but also a tenacious will and fierce loyalty. Their equipment was also incredibly advanced and impressive. The modified energy guns emanated a mysterious light and possessed immense power. A single shot, comparable in force to a rocket, could inflict devastating damage on their targets. The sleek, yet sturdy exoskeleton armor they wore imbued them with immense strength and agility. In combat, this exoskeleton armor allowed them to easily handle a variety of complex situations, effectively withstanding powerful impacts and fierce enemy attacks. The helmets they wore were even more technologically advanced. They effectively protected against psychic attacks, providing crucial protection during combat. Their advanced equipment seemed like something found only in science fiction films or novels. While the Chirida invasion of Earth brought devastating disaster, it also provided SHIELD with valuable insights. By studying and incorporating this alien technology, SHIELD's weaponry was rapidly evolving. This team was meticulously crafted specifically to counter Wes. They underwent intensive training and constant refinement, striving to maximize their effectiveness at the critical moment. Due to their recent formation, they still had some shortcomings. But now, facing the urgency of the situation, they had no choice but to forge ahead. "This team has also been infiltrated by you, Hydra," Pierce said without reply. Wes saw the hint in his eyes. The sheer amount of money and resources required to assemble such a powerful and advanced force is simply unimaginable. From the development and manufacture of advanced exoskeleton armor, to the refinement of powerful energy guns, to the creation of high-tech helmets capable of withstanding psychic attacks, each undertaking required a tremendous investment of manpower, material resources, and financial resources. Countless researchers toiled day and night, expending countless efforts. SHIELD spared no expense in assembling this team, drawing on resources from every possible source. The sheer magnitude of the investment is unimaginable. Destroying this team pains Pierce a little. Weiss pondered this, then created a clone, which opened the window and flew out. Weiss's true self remained in the study, quietly observing the unfolding situation. The clone instantly appeared on the lawn. Nick Fury, upon seeing the clone, attempted to intervene. However, before he could speak, the clone fired a magic bullet into the concrete floor in front of him. With a loud bang, a large hole was blasted through the concrete, sending rubble flying everywhere. Nick Fury, startled by the sudden attack, quickly retreated. "Attack!" Nick Fury, helpless, gave the order to attack. The 18-man squad immediately launched their attack, their energy guns unleashing volleys of energy blast after volley. None of these volleys even struck the hem of the clone's clothing. The clone flicked his finger and uttered 3 words, "Gravity spell." For a moment, the 18 men paused. But they quickly reacted, activating their anti-gravity devices and successfully negotiating the effects of gravity. "Interesting," Wes said in the study, observing the team's performance. "It seems you've carefully considered how to deal with me." Pierce watched the scene before him, his heart filled with nervousness and worry. He could tell Wes wasn't serious, just playful. "We can talk." Pierce, unwilling to lose this carefully constructed unit, attempted to negotiate. "Shut up and just watch." Wes mercilessly sealed Pierce's mouth, silencing him from any sound. Chapter 167 Superhero. "Fire curse," Weiss's clone muttered softly. Instantly, a raging fire erupted like a surging wave. The blazing flames resembled a roaring fire dragon, lunging at the Special Forces team with its fangs and claws bared. Wherever the flames passed, the air seemed to distort and singe, emitting a sizzling sound. The fierce flames were firmly contained by the Special Forces team's energy shield. The shield glowed with a blue light, like an indestructible shield, stubbornly resisting the raging flames. The light on the shield flickered, as if locked in a fierce battle with the flames. Each impact of the flames caused the shield to tremble slightly, but it remained unbroken. The 18-man team advanced steadily, their steps firm and steady, as if nothing could stop them. The distance between them and Weiss's clone was only 10 meters, and at this distance, their firepower intensified. The energy gun continuously unleashed powerful energy blasts, raining down on Weiss's clone like a torrential downpour. Boring, Weiss observed the Special Forces. He could tell at a glance that these team members hadn't undergone physical modifications. To ordinary people, they were considered 1 in a million elite soldiers. Their exceptional combat skills and tenacious will, combined with advanced weaponry, could truly change the course of a war on the battlefield and be the key to victory or defeat. However, their current target was Weiss, and this sealed their fate. The unnoticed lawn began to grow wildly. The once short grass grew at an astonishing rate, quickly reaching a man's height. Like giant green pythons, it quickly entangled the Special Forces' ankles and wrists. The Special Forces reacted quickly, their exoskeletons instantly releasing sharp blades, slicing the grass into tiny pieces. The grass fragments scattered everywhere, like green snowflakes. Then, something unexpected happened to SHIELD, the grass fragments exploded. The explosion was immense, like countless small bombs exploding simultaneously. Not only were the Special Forces engulfed by the blast, but the entire SHIELD convoy and agents were caught in the blast. Armored vehicles were overturned by the powerful impact, with a resounding crash. A large number of agents were killed or seriously injured in the blast, their screams and cries mingling in a horrific scene. The Special Forces team activated their shield at full power, barely withstanding the impact. However, their energy was depleted, and the shield dimmed. Suddenly, a massive hand, a mixture of mud, cement, and car wreckage, rose from the ground. Its immense size, like a demonic hand from hell, it grasped the 18 members of the team with astonishing speed, as if they were mere ants. "Stop, Wes," Nick Fury shouted angrily. His forehead was cut by the blast, bleeding profusely, and he limped. He was lucky, having only suffered minor injuries in the explosion. "These people are innocent." Nick Fury's voice was filled with anger and resignation. "Innocent," the clone scoffed, its laughter tinged with mockery. "You mean these agents with blood on their hands are innocent?" The clone's eyes revealed a coldness and disdain. "They're all for," Nick Fury wanted to explain, but before he could finish, he was interrupted. More high-sounding rhetoric. Not to mention that SHIELD had been infiltrated by Hydra and had committed countless evil deeds. Even if it hadn't been infiltrated under the direction of the US government, SHIELD wasn't clean either. SHIELD claimed to be an international organization, but its top brass and key members were all American. From its inception, SHIELD had served the United States, merely under the guise of the Security Council. The giant hand clenched and released, and the 18 Special Forces soldiers instantly turned into a puddle of mud, mixed with blood, which slowly flowed to the ground. Nick Fury's eyes were bloodshot, filled with rage and grief. "Fire!" he screamed frantically. The single remaining fighter plane unleashed a barrage of fire, raining bullets and shells down on Weiss's clone. However, the bullets and shells were deflected back unharmed by Weiss. The fighter plane, struck by the reflected fire, instantly lost control, crashing into a nearby villa and exploding. The SHIELD forces were completely annihilated by this barrage of attacks, leaving only raging flames and thick smoke at the scene. "Is this what gives you the confidence to attack me?" Weiss tilted his head slightly, his gaze a touch of amusement as he stared intently at Pierce. His tone was filled with disdain, as if he were looking down on an overconfident clown. "What other tricks do you have? Show me." Oh, and forget your gag. Wes' words were casual, yet carried an undeniable authority. He treated Pierce with complete disregard, viewing the conflict as a mere game. Wes waved his hand gently, releasing the spell from Pierce's mouth. However, Pierce remained silent. His mind was filled with conflict and turmoil. He did have a backup plan. Hydra had trained more than just this one team. But seeing how easily Wes dealt with this elite unit, Pierce knew that even if all the teams were united, it would be useless. Wes was no match for ordinary people. Can a multitude of ants truly crush an elephant? No wonder Nick Fury is obsessed with forming the Avengers. Monsters need monsters to be dealt with. Pierce pondered this inwardly. He began to understand Nick Fury's thinking. Against a being as powerful as Wes, ordinary forces were no match. Only superheroes with special abilities could stand a chance against Wes. "Let me go, and we'll never attack you again," Pierce finally said. "Huh." Wes wondered where Pierce got the courage to say that. His laughter was filled with mockery. "You're the superhero who saved New York, and you don't want to." Pierce tried to use moral coercion to get Wes to let him go, but before he could finish his words, Wes interrupted him. PFFT, Wes burst into laughter, his laughter echoing through the study. "How do you know I'm a superhero?" Wes's eyes were full of disdain. He never considered himself a superhero, nor did he feel obligated to save the world. He simply acted on his own terms, unconstrained by anyone. Chapter 168 Curse. Nick Fury's eyes were bloodshot, his clenched fists trembling slightly. He wished he could tear Wes into pieces. The men he had brought with him were all SHIELD's most meticulously trained elite agents. Each one had undergone rigorous training and rigorous screening to be chosen. They should have continued to play a vital role in maintaining world peace. But now, their deaths were undoubtedly a crushing blow to SHIELD. Moreover, this was Washington, the capital of the United States and the political center, home to the nation's core institutions of power and countless important figures. An incident of this magnitude would have the impact of a boulder dropped into a tranquil lake, triggering a series of unpredictable chain reactions. The consequences were unimaginable, and Nick Fury was fully aware of the immense pressure he would face. Meanwhile, Wes and his clone slowly raised their heads. Here they come, a suit of steel armor, clad in red and gold, roared towards them like a brilliant meteor streaking through the dark night sky, its dazzling light blazing. A fighter jet followed closely behind, arriving at the scene in the blink of an eye. Bang! The Iron Man armor dropped from the sky, landing on one knee. The powerful impact caused the ground to tremble slightly, raising a cloud of dust. Steve, Natasha, and Hawkeye all landed on the lawn. The surviving agents lay on the ground, groaning in pain. Their cries echoed in the air, filled with pain, fear, and helplessness, leaving a deep pain in the heart. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, acrid and thick. The billowing smoke, like demonic tentacles, slowly rose and obscured the sky. The cratered ground, overturned armored vehicles, and shattered buildings made the place look like a battlefield in the Middle East. "Wes, we need to talk," Steve's voice boomed in a firm, resonant voice. "Sir, the one before us is not the wizard himself, but a concentrated energy clone." Jarvis's steady voice came over the communication system. Wes wasn't surprised by the arrival of the Avengers. When things got out of hand, someone had to clean up the mess. Without a single movement, Pierce's body floated uncontrollably, like a light feather, trailing behind Wes. This feeling of being completely out of his control filled Pierce, a normally powerful figure, with immense frustration and helplessness, cursing silently inwardly. Wes, on the other hand, appeared incredibly relaxed, striding onto the lawn with deliberate steps. His clone slowly approached him, merging naturally and smoothly with Wes's original form, like water merging into the sea. Steve Wes appeared and hurriedly said, "Wes, release Pierce. Things haven't reached a point of no return yet." His tone was filled with worry and urgency, knowing that if the situation got out of control, the consequences would be unimaginable. The fact that SHIELD has issued a bounty means they're ready for war. Wes's voice echoed in the air. His eyes, sharp as a sword, fixed intently on Nick Fury and the others. "SHIELD is undoubtedly declaring war on me. They should know what that means." A strong sense of oppression emanated from Weiss's words. "Nonsense. SHIELD doesn't have a bounty on you," Nick Fury retorted hastily. "SHIELD has absolutely no bounty on you. I'm sure of that. SHIELD doesn't have 300 million in funds flowing out. That's impossible." Nick Fury's tone was firm. So, this person is an SHIELD. Weiss narrowed his eyes slightly, a hint of sarcasm playing on his lips. Pierce is indeed a SHIELD employee. He couldn't have, and wouldn't have, the right to access such a large sum of money. Someone must have framed him. Nick Fury firmly believed that everything at SHIELD was under his control. SHIELD has strict management systems and oversight mechanisms. There's no way this would happen, idiot, Wes scoffed, his voice thick with disdain. Weiss stabbed his wand directly into Pierce's head, but no blood came out. The scene was incredibly eerie. Pierce's eyes turned wide as he wailed. Wes twirled his wand slowly, causing Pierce to convulse in agony. A silvery, transparent thread emerged from Pierce's head. With a flick of his wand, the thread soared into the air and exploded like a firework. Instantly, an image appeared in midair, a memory of Pierce instructing his men to issue a bounty. The image was incredibly clear, sharper than even 4K, revealing every pore on Pierce's face. Nick Fury's first reaction was that Wes had fabricated this memory. However, as he examined the image more closely, he noticed a familiar office decor in the background, as well as some subtle details of Pierce's movements that would be unfamiliar to an unfamiliar observer. Faced with such irrefutable evidence, the men were speechless, their faces darkening. Steve frowned slightly. Tony cursed out loud, "Damn it. It's SHIELD's doing again. Are we just toilet paper?" Nick Fury had no idea this had happened, but he knew he couldn't admit it. "Who knows if you made this memory up? It can't serve as evidence." However, his words paled in the face of such irrefutable evidence. He was thick-skinned enough to stop a bullet. Wes wasn't about to argue with Nick Fury. He simply looked at him coldly, his eyes filled with mockery. Wes knew arguing with Nick Fury was pointless. He would only use excuses and justifications to shirk responsibility. Wes decided to resolve the situation his own way. A black mist emerged from Wes's wand, seemingly alive, slowly creeping into Pierce's nostrils and ears. Pierce watched in horror, trying to struggle but finding himself unable to move. "What did you do to me?" Pierce's voice was filled with fear and anxiety. He felt an unbearable itching all over his body, as if countless ants were crawling on him. Pierce rubbed his hands against the grass, trying to ease the pain, but it was no use. "This spell won't kill you, it's just a little curse." Wes touched his thumb and index finger together. "This curse won't cause you pain, it just makes you itch." Chapter 169 Jin Bing's Invitation. Wes slowly walked over to Pierce and stomped hard on his chest. Pierce's body trembled slightly, a pained expression on his face. "The itching continues 24/7, getting worse every other day. I wonder how long you can endure this." Wes's voice was cold and unforgiving. Pierce felt a chill in his heart, imagining the endless suffering he would face in the future. "Can you still defeat braised egg like this?" Wes whispered, his voice low enough for only Pierce to hear. "Struggle as hard as you can." Wes's lips curled up slightly in a mocking smile. Then, Wes kicked Pierce to Steve's feet, as if discarding a worthless object. "I'll give it back to you," Wes said, and disappeared in an instant. Nick Fury quickly helped Pierce to his feet, his face grim and terrifying. "I need an explanation." Nick Fury's voice was filled with anger and questioning. "Of course," Pierce replied, his voice trembling, despite the itching. "But first, I need to perform an operation." Pierce knew that with current surgical techniques, they could sever some nerves, numb his skin, and temporarily relieve the itching pain. Nick Fury looked him in the eye, his gaze filled with suspicion and scrutiny. Pierce didn't shy away, meeting his gaze. He couldn't afford to be guilty at this moment, or Nick Fury would hold him captive. Pierce knew he had to remain calm to handle the crisis. "Snakes and rats from the same nest," Tony uttered with mockery, then flew away in his suit. He was deeply disappointed with SHIELD's actions and no longer wanted to be part of this mess. Steve sighed, knowing he couldn't just walk away like Tony had. He decided to stay and clean up the mess. The next morning, the news reported that a Washington official had caused an explosion due to improper use of natural gas. This explanation was obviously far-fetched, and could only deceive the honest. No one with a clue would believe it. Some organizations, based on traces left from the two battles last night, deduced that Weiss was the mysterious wizard from the Battle of New York and the owner of the Hogwarts potion shop. This news spread quickly, and countless organizations and individuals sought to locate Weiss. Some sought to control him and exploit his power for their own ends, Some sought to trade with him for precious magical artifacts, and some simply sought the power of magic, eager to explore this mysterious realm. However, many others knew he was not to be trifled with and placed him on the Don't Touch Me list. When the bounty on Weiss was rescinded, Weiss took the news lightly. However, he never expected that upon his return to New York, someone would eagerly approach him. To Weiss's surprise, the visitor was none other than the Kingpin. Standing 2 meters tall and weighing 204 kilograms, the Kingpin's immense size and imposing presence gave him a powerful, intimidating presence. Even in his white suit and tie, the crisp, straight-cut suit stretched tight against his massive frame, it couldn't conceal the powerful aura he exuded, creating a commanding presence. This image was a stark departure from the traditional image of a businessman. His imposing build, piercing gaze, and the domineering air he exuded in his every gesture perfectly matched his status as a tyrant of New York's underworld. "Hello, Mr. Irwin." Kingpin's voice was deep and rich. He bowed modestly, his expensive suit straining even tighter with the gesture, as if threatened to burst under his powerful muscles. "Kingpin," Weiss frowned slightly, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He couldn't understand why Kingpin had come to him at this moment. Didn't he know that SHIELD and the US government were desperate to kill him? Contacting him during such a sensitive time was undoubtedly extremely dangerous. "I have a business matter to discuss with you," Kingpin stated bluntly. "Want potions?" Wes refused without hesitation. "I'm not short of money right now." "Of course not." Kingpin quickly waved his hand in denial. He personally opened the back door of the car, leaning slightly aside and making a gesture of invitation. "This isn't the place to talk." Wes raised an eyebrow, observing the sincere Kingpin, and secretly speculated on his intentions. A moment later, Wes got on the back seat. Kingpin was visibly relieved to see Wes get in. Then, Kingpin took the driver's seat and drove himself. The car was clearly specially modified, otherwise, with Kingpin's massive size, he would probably be riding the wheel. All the way, in silence, the car drove smoothly through the streets of New York. Finally, they arrived at Fisk Tower. This was one of Kingpin's bases, where he managed his criminal organization, planned his crimes, and conducted transactions and negotiations with other criminals and forces. Taking the elevator to his top-floor office, Kingpin sent all his subordinates away. "No one is allowed to disturb me without my permission." Kingpin's voice was serious and authoritative. At this moment, only Wes and Kingpin were left in the office. The silent space seemed shrouded in an invisible atmosphere of tension. Sunlight streamed in through the large floor-to-ceiling windows, but it couldn't dispel the oppressive atmosphere. Wes sat quietly, studying Kingpin across from him. Kingpin straightened his massive frame, leaning slightly against his desk, his eyes deep and complex, as if calculating his next words. "Mr. Irwin, have you ever heard of dragon bones?" Kingpin spoke directly, his voice deep and powerful, echoing in the quiet office. "Are you talking about the dragon bones in Kunlun Mountain?" Wes narrowed his eyes slightly, a hint of surprise in his tone. "Mr. Irwin is indeed knowledgeable," Kingpin laughed, a smile so chilling it could scare a child to tears. "But if the dragon bones aren't in Kunlun, they're in New York, in Manhattan." Now Wes's interest peaked, and he leaned forward slightly, his eyes glittering with curiosity. "Tell me what happened." King took a leisurely drag on his cigar and slowly exhaled a cloud of smoke. The smoke curled up in the air. "This story started several years ago." King was lost in his memories. Wes didn't interrupt him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170 Dragonbone. Madame Go is undoubtedly a formidable figure in the New York criminal underworld. Like a venomous snake lurking in the shadows, she was cold and deadly. With her cunning and tactical tactics, she firmly controlled a large portion of the heroin trade, wreaking havoc within the underworld. Her influence stretched like an invisible web, enveloping the dark corners of New York, controlling every aspect of the drug trade. Like King Byung, she had clear interests within the criminal world. King Byung, the overlord of the New York underworld, possessed immense power and boundless ambition. Madame Go understood the benefits of collaborating with King Byung, believing that a partnership would bring them greater profits and power. So, they chose to partner. Initially, their partnership seemed harmonious. Both parties benefited, and they jointly plotted how to expand their criminal empire. However, as time went on, King Byung gradually realized that Madame Gao's motive seemed more than just money. Her actions shone with a mysterious aura, as if she were pursuing a greater goal. This piqued King Byung's curiosity, and his suspicious nature made it impossible to ignore this anomaly. So, he sent his men to investigate. His men searched for intelligence, attempting to uncover the truth behind Madame Gao's mysterious actions. After considerable effort, Kingpin's men discovered that Madame Gao was searching for a mysterious location. This discovery further perplexed Kingpin, who wondered what Madame Gao was seeking and why she was so secretive. Kingpin probed Madame Gao several times, but she remained steadfast, refusing to divulge a single tidbit. As the tyrant of the New York underworld, Kingpin would not tolerate such a situation as one outside his control. Accustomed to controlling everything, he considered anything beyond his control a threat to his position and power. This escalated into tense and dangerous conflict between them. Madame Gao's men were revealed to be ninjas, swift and stealthy, like ghosts in the darkness. They mastered a wide range of assassination techniques, making them incredibly difficult to defend against. Furthermore, Madame Gao possessed a mysterious power called Qi, which gave her an advantage in combat, allowing her to unleash extraordinary strength. Kingpin was no pushover either. He possessed a mastery of various forms of hand-to-hand combat, demonstrating exceptional combat skills. His strength was like that of a ferocious beast, each strike unleashing devastating devastation. In the clash with Madame Gao, both sides suffered losses. Jin Bing's men also suffered considerable losses, but they stubbornly resisted Madame Gao's attacks. New York was, after all, Jin Bing's territory, where he possessed extensive connections and resources. Although Madame Gao had first discovered the buried dragon bones, Jin Bing, leveraging his influence, had snatched possession of the site. Furthermore, he held a press conference, announcing his intention to transform the site into a new New York landmark. This move immediately captured the attention of countless people, catapulting the site into the spotlight. Madame Gao was immediately in a difficult position. Despite their formidable capabilities, they were merely a shadowy criminal organization, unable to compete openly with Jin Bing. Jin Bing's exposure of the site severely hampered Madame Gao's plans. Madame Gao was furious, but helpless. To proceed with her plan, Madame Gao was forced to negotiate and collaborate with Jin Bing. She knew that, under these circumstances, confronting Jin Bing would only put her in a more disadvantageous position. Under my step-by-step pressure, Madame Gao was forced to tell the truth. Kingpin's massive frame leaned back slightly, leaning back in his comfortable office chair, a triumphant glint in his eyes. Kingpin, the overlord of the New York underworld, possessed unparalleled wisdom and scheming. Every move he made was meticulously calculated, like a master chess player mastering the entire game. You're looking for me, Weiss frowned slightly. Madame Gao has 4 companions who share her magical power of Qi, Kingpin said confidently but without arrogance, his voice deep and powerful. If the 5 of them join forces, I'm no match for them. A flicker of worry crossed Kingpin's eyes. He knew the strength of these 5. He knew they would never honor their agreement to give him a share of the dragon bone. The moment it appeared would mark the end of their relationship. You're here for help, yes, and 2 people will always get more than 6. Kingpin's eyes shone with greed and eagerness. He knew the value of the dragon bone. If he could obtain it, he would fulfill his wish. Why are you looking for me? Aren't you afraid of being targeted by SHIELD? Kingpin shook off the ash from his cigarette and said slowly, of course, it's because Mr. Erwin is very powerful. As for SHIELD, I can't care less. A hint of determination shone in Kingpin's eyes. He knew his goal, and he was willing to take risks to achieve it. Ever since Kingpin learned that the dragon bone possessed the power to resurrect the dead, he had been determined to obtain it. The assassination of his wife and son had plunged him into immense pain. He had been searching for a way to revive them. The dragon bone was his hope. As long as it can bring my wife and children back, I'm willing to do it, no matter the cost. Kingpin's voice was filled with determination, his eyes revealing a resolute look. Aren't you afraid I might take the dragon bone for myself? Wes asked with a hint of teasing, eager to gauge Kingpin's reaction. That's not out of the question. The smoke obscured Kingpin's eyes, obscuring his expression. I know you. Your shop is renowned in New York. You possess immense power, yet you still rely on selling magic potions for gold. This proves you're a man of principle. For this, I'm willing to take a gamble. Kingpin's courage was undeniable. He knew it was a risk, but he was willing to risk everything for his wife and children. Pa, 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 crisp, resounding applause suddenly erupted in the quiet room. With a smile on his face, Wes slowly raised his hands to applaud Kingpin. Kingpin's rise to the throne of New York's underground was no accident, nor was it a stroke of fate. In this bustling city, rife with darkness and strife, Kingpin relied on his exceptional strength to forge his way to the pinnacle of power. His strength, wisdom, courage, and perseverance, like four sharp swords, helped him sweep through the New York underworld. Such a man is destined to succeed in whatever he does. Chapter 171 Cooperation. Are you agreeing to cooperate? Jinbing's tone was filled with anticipation, his eyes fixed on Weiss. He leaned forward slightly, eagerly awaiting Weiss's response. Jinbing was filled with a mixture of nervousness and excitement, knowing full well that collaborating with Weiss would have a crucial impact on his plan. Why not? Weiss's response was concise and powerful. A faint smile crossed his face. Upon hearing Weiss's response, Jinbing's face immediately lit up with joy. He quickly picked up the bottle and filled 2 glasses for both of them. Mr. Erwin, I wish us a happy cooperation. Jinbing raised his glass. Happy cooperation. Weiss took the glass and gently drank the wine. The wine spread in his mouth, bringing with it a mellow taste and rich aroma. Weiss put down the glass, looked at Jinbing and said, "Also, you can call me Weiss." "Okay, Weiss." Jinbing's smile grew even brighter. He knew that with Weiss's help, his plan would succeed. Jinbing began to introduce Weiss to Madame Go and her organization, the Hand and Harmony Society. He shared all the intelligence he'd gathered with Weiss, detailing the Hand's history, structure, members, goals, and actions. Kingpin's vivid and detailed account gave Weiss a deeper understanding of this mysterious organization. Weiss listened intently. Although he had previously learned something about the Hand through comics, that was, after all, fiction. Now, he was facing a real organization, so discrepancies were inevitable. Weiss carefully analyzed Kingpin's intelligence, trying to find key clues and information. "That's all I know about the Hand," Kingpin said, taking a sip of wine to moisten his throat. "But one thing is certain, the day the dragon bone appears, the 5 fingers of the Hand will definitely appear." Kingpin's eyes revealed a firm and decisive look. "That's when we act." Weiss nodded slightly, understanding Kingpin's meaning. They must seize the moment the dragon bone appears and launch a fierce battle against the Hand. Indeed, Kingpin nodded, a flicker of excitement in his eyes, but then a hint of distress appeared. "I'm afraid a bunch of people might get in the way," Kingpin said with a hint of worry. Wes knew who he was talking about. Superheroes like the Punisher and Daredevil, who roamed the streets of New York, were his old rivals. They had always been committed to defeating Kingpin and his criminal gang. If these guys dared to cause trouble then, Kingpin's eyes flashed with a fierce gleam, his fists clenched tightly. "Whoever prevents me from resurrecting my wife and children will be crushed to pieces." Kingpin's tone was filled with determination and coldness. Then, calming down, he said, "For easier communication, Mr. Weiss, how about staying here?" "Sure," Wes agreed without hesitation. He knew that working with Kingpin required close communication and coordination, and living here would make their operations much more convenient. Kingpin dialed a number. "Clean up the room." Kingpin's tone was concise and decisive. "It's done, boss." A respectful voice came from the other end. "Yes," Kingpin nodded with satisfaction. He was very pleased with the efficiency of his men. And so, Wes settled down at Fisk Tower. Kingpin displayed astonishing generosity. The room he referred to was actually an entire floor reserved for Weiss's use. It was spacious, bright, and well-equipped, from the comfortable lounge area to the advanced service equipment, all demonstrating Kingpin's sincerity and generosity. Whatever Mr. Erwin requests must be met, his word is an order. These were Kingpin's solemn instructions to his men. His tone was firm and forceful, leaving no room for question. Kingpin, fully aware of the importance of collaborating with Weiss, spared no effort in demonstrating respect and sincerity. Upon hearing this order, his men nodded in understanding, knowing they must meet every request of Weiss with the highest standards. Kingpin, it must be said, was truly a man of character. He understood the importance of providing adequate respect and convenience in any partnership. This gesture resonated with Weiss, and while Weiss didn't require such a large space or have any special needs, Kingpin's thoughtfulness still reassured him. After giving his instructions, Kingpin left the building, as he had many important matters to attend to. He had to continue dealing with Madame Gao, carefully planning every step. At the same time, he had to closely monitor the excavation of the keel to ensure everything was under control. Elsewhere, in the perilous Hell's Kitchen, night fell quietly. Long abandoned street lights cast a faint glow, struggling to dispel the darkness. Matt Murdock, also known as Daredevil, stood quietly on the rooftop. The night wasn't a burden to him, but his companion. He had long since adapted to the darkness, even skillfully using it as cover to carry out his operations. His ears twitched slightly, as if listening to every movement around him. "You're here," a stern-faced man slowly emerged from the darkness. In the faint moonlight, the lines of his face were as hard as a knife. On his square face, a pair of deep eyes, like stars in the cold night, were cold and sharp. A black tactical vest, draped with weapons and equipment, clung tightly to his muscular frame. His black combat uniform made him blend seamlessly into the darkness, as if he were part of it. He is Frank, the Punisher, feared by countless gangs. If Matt Murdock hadn't revealed his whereabouts, no one would have noticed him hiding in the corner. His concealment skills are extremely good, allowing him to approach his target without being noticed. However, Daredevil, with his keen senses, still discovered his presence. "How did you find me this time?" Frank's tone was stiff, without a trace of emotion. His voice was as cold and firm as he was. "Your concealment skills are excellent, but your heartbeat gave you away," Matt Murdock answered calmly. There was no trace of pride in his tone. Yet, Frank nodded slightly and said nothing more. He asked, "What do you want to talk to me about?" Although it was a question, his tone did not fluctuate at all, like an emotionless robot. Chapter 172 Cooperation 2. "Work with us to overthrow the Kingpin," Daredevil's voice echoed through the silent night sky, his tone filled with determination and anticipation. His red figure stood out in the dim moonlight, his masked eyes revealing a dedication to justice. Daredevil knew the Kingpin's power was immense, and that he and his companions alone would be unable to overthrow him. Therefore, he hoped to unite with the Punisher and fight for peace in New York. "I refuse," the Punisher replied without hesitation, his voice cold and resolute. He turned to leave, his black combat suit fluttering slightly in the night breeze. He was different from these people. The Punisher never considered himself a superhero, he was an Avenger returned from hell. In his heart, there was only hatred for criminals and an unwavering pursuit of justice. Unlike other superheroes, he was not bound by morality or the law. He would only punish criminals in his own way, mercilessly punishing them. The Punisher showed no mercy to criminals or gangs. He struck with ruthlessness and decisiveness, leaving no one alive. In his battles, there was no compromise, no mercy, only death. Every time he struck, the scene resembled a slaughterhouse, blood everywhere. While his methods were brutal, he believed they were the best punishment for criminals. Only by inflicting true fear on criminals could they deter them from committing crimes again. Many superheroes disagreed with his approach and were repulsed by him. They believed the Punisher's actions were too extreme and violated the very principles of superheroes. They advocated solving problems through law and justice, not violence and bloodshed. However, the Punisher didn't care about their opinions. He believed these superheroes' methods were too merciful, and the best way to deal with these scoundrels was to send them to see God. "Frank," Daredevil called out the Punisher's name. There was a hint of urgency in his voice. He knew the Punisher's abilities, and with his help, their chances of overthrowing the Kingpin would greatly increase. The Kingpin's recent actions are unusual. There's a serious problem with that so-called landmark he's trying to build. Daredevil tried to convince the Punisher of the Kingpin's danger. The Punisher paused, leaning slightly to listen to Daredevil's explanation. While he wasn't interested in Daredevil's invitation, he was concerned about the Kingpin's actions. He knew the Kingpin was a dangerous figure, and if his plan succeeded, it would bring devastating disaster to New York. "He's currently plotting a conspiracy with Madame Gao," Daredevil explained, revealing the details of Dragonbone and his vendetta against a hand. He hoped the Punisher would understand the gravity of the situation and join their forces. "Frank, we need your help," Daredevil said, almost pleadingly. "The Kingpin and the Hand far outnumber us, and we need a commander." Daredevil knew the Punisher's combat experience and leadership skills, and his joining would greatly enhance their effectiveness. The Punisher pondered for a moment. A hint of hesitation crossed his eyes. He knew Daredevil had a point, but he also had his own principles. He didn't want to be bound by anyone, he wanted to act his way. He also understood that if the Kingpin's plot succeeded, it would bring devastating disaster to New York. He couldn't just sit back and watch. I have 3 requests. Agree, and we can work together. Otherwise, we'll go our separate ways, the Punisher finally said. There was a firmness in his voice. He knew his demands might put Daredevil in a difficult position, but he wouldn't give in easily. Daredevil quickly agreed. He and his companions had already discussed this. They knew the Punisher's abilities, and if they could gain his help, their chances of overthrowing the Kingpin would greatly increase. They were willing to make some concessions in exchange for the Punisher's cooperation. First, obey orders. Frank held up a finger. His eyes shone with authority. In battle, unified command was essential for maximum effectiveness. Okay, Daredevil replied without hesitation. He knew the Punisher's request was reasonable. In battle, a leader was essential to ensure the smooth operation. Second, obey orders, Frank emphasized. Third, obey orders. Daredevil frowned slightly and couldn't help but grumble. Your demands are very demanding. His tone carried a hint of resignation and dissatisfaction, clearly finding the Punisher's demands somewhat difficult to accept. After all, when superheroes work together, teamwork and democratic decision-making are often emphasized. The Punisher's demands seemed overly harsh. However, Frank didn't hesitate and turned away. Wait, what a humorless guy, Daredevil said quickly, his voice tinged with urgency. I promise, Daredevil sighed helplessly, knowing he had no other choice. To achieve his goal, he had to make some concessions. We can formulate a battle plan. Frank's tone remained stiff, devoid of emotion. Daredevil led Frank back to the secret base. Located in an abandoned warehouse in Hell's Kitchen, it had been meticulously converted into the Defenders' Operations Center. Equipped with a variety of supplies and weapons, the base provided strong support for their battle. The other 3 Defenders, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Danny Rand, had been waiting there for a while. Besides these 3, there was a white-haired old man, holding a wooden stick. Like Daredevil, he was blind. The old man possessed a unique aura that imbued the entire base with a mysterious and solemn atmosphere. His hair was as white as snow, his face was weathered and resolute, and despite his blindness, his eyes revealed a deep wisdom and strength. Daredevil introduced Frank. This is my master, Stick Old Man, leader of the True Pure Order and a martial arts master. His tone was filled with respect and pride. Stick Old Man nodded slightly and greeted Frank. Frank, on the other hand, remained aloof. Tell me what you are good at and what you are capable of, Frank said expressionlessly, his tone carrying an unquestionable authority. His eyes scanned everyone present, as if he were examining a group of soldiers. Jessica couldn't help herself. She frowned and said disapprovingly, we are not your men. Her voice was filled with resistance, clearly resenting Frank's commanding tone. Chapter 173 Plan. Jessica, we've already agreed, Daredevil reassured her. He gently patted Jessica's shoulder, urging her to calm down. Tisk Jessica, though disgruntled, still shared her information with Frank. There was a hint of reluctance in her tone, but she did her best to describe her abilities objectively. I possess extraordinary strength and endurance. I can lift heavy objects with ease and withstand significant impact. My body is also incredibly resilient, making ordinary attacks difficult to harm, Jessica finished, raising her chin slightly, as if to show off her abilities to Frank. The others also shared their abilities, even the Stick Man. After listening to each one's introduction, Frank nodded slightly. His face remained expressionless, but a hint of satisfaction lingered in his eyes. Each of them possessed unique abilities. If they could unite and leverage their strengths, they would undoubtedly unleash immense power. The Punisher began to formulate a strategy based on the members of the Defenders. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on the map before him. His finger moved rapidly across the map, sometimes tapping a location, sometimes tracing a route, spouting simple yet forceful commands. Jessica's scalp tingled as she listened. Is this guy really not a terrorist? This is New York, her voice was filled with shock and worry. Jessica, observing the Punisher's cold expression and his radical tactical plans, felt a surge of unease. New York was a bustling metropolis. She couldn't imagine the consequences of such a fierce battle in such a place. The Punisher pointed at the map. This place is completely surrounded by gangs. No ordinary people will enter. His voice remained cold and emotionless. However, the others exchanged glances, unsure what to say. They felt the Punisher's plan was too radical. It was fraught with risk and uncertainty. If anything went wrong, the consequences would be disastrous. The Punisher snorted, annoyed at their hesitation. Daredevil made a decision. Since I've agreed to follow your instructions, I'll do as you say. Danny hadn't expected Daredevil to agree to such a plan. His voice was filled with surprise and worry. Danny, this is our best chance to defeat the Kingpin. Daredevil looked at Danny, his eyes filled with determination. The others, without further ado, accepted the Punisher's proposal. The negotiations between the Kingpin and Madame Gao appeared to be going smoothly. On the surface, they had agreed on a distribution plan for the Dragon Bone. However, deep down, both sides harbored a desire to monopolize the bone. They were each plotting the right moment to seize the precious bone. Who would be the more skillful, who would ultimately emerge victorious, remained uncertain. From outside the construction site, the landmark building Kingpin had promised was already taking shape. Though only half built, it already towered over all nearby structures, rising like a towering mountain, a striking sight. However, this was merely the appearance. Once inside, the true heart of the matter lay beneath the ground. Surrounded by hand ninjas and gangsters, they maintained a tight siege, digging day and night. The excavation had reached a depth of dozens of meters, yet there was still no sign of the dragon bones. Jinbing and Madame Gao, usually incredibly patient, were beginning to grow impatient. "Looks like we've found something," one of the excavators suddenly shouted. Everyone's attention was instantly drawn to the excavator, filled with anticipation and curiosity. "What a strange bone," another exclaimed. Upon hearing this, Madame Gao leaped down like lightning, her agility completely belying her seemingly fragile appearance. Her men quickly made way for her. Madame Gao crouched down and gently brushed the dust off the dragon bones, her movements as gentle as if she were caressing a precious work of art. Her fingers gently touched the bones, inhaling their ancient, mysterious aura. "It can't be wrong, this is the dragon bone." Madame Gao, who usually kept her emotions expressionless, broke into a broad smile, one filled with excitement and joy. Just then, Jinbing had quietly appeared behind her. "Is this the dragon bone?" Kingpin gazed at the fossilized object on the ground, his eyes filled with confusion. "Nothing special. It's hard to imagine it possessing the power to bring the dead back to life." Kingpin's tone tinged with doubt. "That's because it hasn't been activated yet," Madame Gao said slowly. "How do we activate the dragon bone?" Kingpin pressed. "It requires the power of Iron Fist," Madame Gao replied. "Iron Fist?" Danny Rand, Kingpin snorted. "Do we need that piece of crap?" Kingpin clearly held Danny Rand in contempt. "This generation of Iron Fist is very weak, but only the power within Iron Fist can activate the dragon bone," Madame Gao explained. "The next step is to capture Iron Fist. It won't be that troublesome. Just let out a little information, and Iron Fist will come on his own." Kingpin spoke slowly, his lips curling up in a sinister smile. "The defenders have always been inseparable." Madame Gao frowned slightly. "This is perfect. Let's wipe out these troublemakers once and for all. That way, no one can stop our business." Kingpin's voice was cold and resolute, his eyes gleaming with a fierce glint. He was eager to completely defeat the defenders. These superheroes had damaged much of his business. "You're truly thoughtful," Mrs. Gao said, her tone a mixture of praise and sarcasm. Her eyes held a complex mixture of approval for Kingpin's strategy and wariness of his ambition. Mrs. Gao knew that while collaborating with Kingpin could bring enormous benefits, he was cunning and resourceful, and could easily be exploited without warning. Thus, the two collaborated, yet remained wary of each other. The ultimate winner remained uncertain until the very last moment. On Friday, the sun shone brightly, bringing a touch of warmth to the city. At the construction site controlled by Kingpin, all construction teams received a cease work notice. This news was undoubtedly a welcome surprise for the workers, who had toiled so long. A rare day off, plus the chance to get their wages, was something they wouldn't refuse. Those who remained were all members of the Mafia. Chapter 174 Foreplay. "This is a trap." The Punisher's stern face remained expressionless as his voice icy. He immediately recognized the Kingpin's meticulously orchestrated ploy. Knowing the Kingpin's cunning and cruelty, the Punisher knew this trap was fraught with danger. He crouched down and began carefully examining each firearm. His movements were deft and focused, as if he were handling a precious work of art. He gently pulled the bolt, feeling the mechanism, ensuring every component was in perfect condition. Then, he pressed each bullet, the crisp sound echoing in the silent chamber like the prelude to battle. The Punisher focused intently on preparing for the ensuing battle, his single conviction, to destroy the enemy and uphold justice. "We have to go." Iron Fist Danny Rand stepped forward. We must return the dragon bone to Kunlun. Iron Fist understood the dragon bone's importance. He could not stand by and watch it fall into the hands of evil. He had to shoulder his responsibility as Iron Fist. The Punisher, however, showed no concern for the feuds between Kunlun, the Xiantian society, and the Hand. In his eyes, the Mafia were his only enemies. He cared only about how many Mafia members he could eliminate in this battle and bring justice to the innocent victims. His goal was simple and clear, to use his strength and weapons to bring justice to the evil that was deserved. Indeed, only today will the 5 fingers of the Hand unite. The stick old man's voice was steady and powerful. His aged face betrayed a steely determination. The stick old man was well aware of the Hand's power and evil. These 5 centuries-old figures were scattered across the globe, making their capture difficult under normal circumstances. Only when faced with something as important as the emergence of the dragon bone would they set aside their own interests and unite. This was a rare opportunity, and the stick old man was not about to miss it, the chance to wipe out the Hand. Stop talking nonsense. Go get them. The fiery Jessica clinked her fists together with a dull thud. Her eyes burned with rage, and she couldn't wait to engage in battle. Let's take down that fat bastard Kingpin today, the other members of the Defenders agreed. No matter how dangerous the situation, they wouldn't retreat or flinch. They would bravely face their enemies and fight for justice. Tonight, the Punisher's eyes gleamed coldly, his voice as hard as steel. New York's nightlife had just begun, and dazzling lights shone like stars in every corner of the city. Young men and women streamed into bars and clubs, dressed in fashionable clothes, their faces brimming with excitement and anticipation. Amidst the flashing lights and throbbing music, they indulged their lust. Unknowingly, these people had become potential clients for Kingpin. Kingpin, like a spider lurking in the darkness, wove a vast web of drugs, violence, and lust, ensnaring these young souls. They lost themselves in the revelry, falling into an endless abyss of desire, unaware that they were slowly heading towards destruction. The revelry didn't end until 2 or 3 in the morning. The doors of the bars and clubs slowly opened, and drunken men and women emerged. Their steps were unsteady, their eyes hazy, as if they were still immersed in the revelry of the moment. Some, still unsatisfied, plunged into the next round of madness, seeking more excitement and thrills. Others chose to go home and revel, unwilling to waste even a moment, wanting to savor this brief night to the fullest. This is depravity, Jessica observed, feeling helpless and angry. She had also experienced a period of depravity, a period of deep emotional damage. Lost in pain, she fell into a pit of despair. But she eventually emerged, found her way, and became a superhero, fighting to protect the innocent. However, these people had chosen to fall into this depravity of their own free will. Jessica could tell at a glance that many of them were addicts. They sacrificed their health and their futures in pursuit of a fleeting thrill. They were addicted to drugs, unable to extricate themselves, and fell prey to the Mafia. Damn it, all the money they use to buy drugs goes to the Mafia. We're all trying to protect these addicts. If this continues, the whole country will be doomed, Jessica said indignantly. Luke Cage walked over to Jessica, gently patted her shoulder, and soothed her. Jessica, don't be so angry. As long as we defeat the Kingpin and Madame Gao, no drugs will flow into New York. Our efforts will not be in vain, and we will definitely make this city a better place. Luke Cage's voice was low and powerful. Jessica listened to Luke Cage's words and nodded slightly. She knew that Luke Cage had a point, but the anger and helplessness in her heart still lingered. She looked at the drunken young men and women, her heart filled with worry and heartache. Still too naive, the old man with the stick sighed silently as he looked at this group of enthusiastic and innocent young people. He knew that these young people were full of justice and courage, but they still understood too little about the complexities of the world. Even if the Kingpin wasn't there, other gangs would still be transporting drugs. As long as there's demand, there's trade. The old man with the stick understood that the drug problem was a complex social issue, and simply defeating the Kingpin and Madame Gao wouldn't completely solve it. This was one of the reasons why SHIELD and the New York government allowed the Kingpin to exist. There's no end to the gangs. As long as there's a profit drive, new gangs will rise. Since Kingpin became the king of the New York underworld, keeping the gangs in check, street fights have decreased significantly. Kingpin, through his powerful influence and tactics, has consolidated and managed the New York gangs, reducing inter-gang conflicts and improving public security to a certain extent. Kingpin also legalized his illicit gains by establishing legitimate companies to launder money. This not only reduced crime in New York but also increased tax revenue for the government. However, Kingpin's presence also brought many problems. His vast power and brutal methods wielded immense influence over New York's politics and economy. His presence also made some people uneasy, fearing he would become an uncontrollable threat. Kingpin's fall would be the first to cause headaches for the NYPD and the New York government. They would have to deal with the chaos caused by the gangs and the deterioration of public security, while also addressing the various issues Kingpin left behind. Chapter 175, Calculations by All Parties. Quiet, we're here. The Punisher's deep, solemn voice instantly raised the tension within the car. He tilted his head slightly, his eyes sweeping across the group like sharp swords, and he reminded them again, from now on, follow my instructions. His tone was filled with unquestionable authority, and everyone's expressions instantly grew solemn. Don't worry, at this point, we won't regret it, Daredevil responded first, his voice steady and resolute. The others nodded in agreement. The Punisher nodded slightly, then opened the car door and stepped out. He stood beside the car, quietly gazing at the brightly lit construction site. The dazzling lights glared against the darkness. Damn it! Why are they turning on such bright lights so late at night? Danny Rand cursed under his breath. The original plan was to sneak in quietly, taking advantage of the situation by surprise, but now it seemed impossible. What's the situation in there? The Punisher spoke to a shadowy area. His voice, though soft, carried clearly enough to reach everyone. Something seemed to be moving slightly within the shadows. A moment later, Erica, clad in a ninja nightgown, emerged from the shadows. The security is tight. Outside are all gang members, and inside are hand ninjas. Erica's voice was cold and calm. Although she had left the hand, her stealth skills hadn't diminished in the slightest. The dragon bone is on the bottom floor. The security there is too strict for me to infiltrate. But I'm sure the hand's 5 fingers and the Kingpin are all down there. Excellent. A smile crossed the Punisher's frozen face. Execute Plan B. His voice was as hard as steel. Luke Cage strode into the driver's seat. He sat down firmly, his hands firmly gripping the steering wheel. Hum, hum, hum. The engine of the meticulously modified pickup truck roared with a deafening roar, like the mad roar of an enraged beast. The powerful sound wave seemed to penetrate the eardrums, giving one a strong sense of oppression. Luke Cage expertly shifted gears, his movements decisive and swift, without a single hesitation. Then, he floored the accelerator. The force caused the truck's tires to scrape against the ground, sending plumes of smoke billowing. He quickly lifted the clutch and released the parking brake, and the pickup truck, like a wild beast unleashed, charged towards the construction site with unstoppable momentum. The gate seemed vulnerable to this ferocious beast. With a resounding bang, the gate flew away, sending twisted metal shards flying like meteors. Several gang members, unable to dodge, were instantly crushed beneath the wheels, their lives mercilessly taken by the heavy truck before they could even utter a scream. Broken limbs and blood crisscrossed the ground, creating a gruesome scene. Someone's breaking in, a gang member shouted in terror, his voice thick with panic and fear. Open fire. At the command, dozens of gang members drew their submachine guns. They quickly surrounded the truck and unleashed a barrage of fire without hesitation. Bang, bang, bang. A barrage of gunfire erupted like a torrential downpour, countless bullets flying towards the truck like locusts. The truck was instantly riddled with bullet holes, its hull pockmarked with bullet holes, its windows shattered. The clink of metal against glass intertwined. Luke Cage, sitting inside the truck, remained unfazed as he calmly pressed the detonator. Boom. The C4 explosives hidden inside the truck exploded with the force of a volcanic eruption. The powerful shockwave spread outward, instantly killing all the surrounding gang members. Their bodies were torn to pieces by the blast, sending blood and flesh flying everywhere. The ground shook violently, as if from a powerful earthquake. Gang members further away were thrown to the ground, dazed, blood streaming from their ears, and groaning in pain. A gang member, seemingly a cadre, staggered to his feet, his eyes filled with confusion and fear. Before he could fully grasp his surroundings, a pistol was pressed to his forehead. Bang! With a resounding gunshot, his head exploded like a watermelon, brains splattering everywhere. The Punisher stood expressionless beside the unconscious gang members, his eyes revealing a profound indifference. Without hesitation, he raised his gun and shot the unconscious gang members one by one. Each shot seemed to declare his zero tolerance for evil, and his cold demeanor was chilling. Danny Rand witnessed the Punisher's inhumane behavior, and a strong sense of disgust and opposition surged in his heart. He hurried forward, trying to stop the Punisher's cruel act. However, Daredevil gently shook his head. At the same time, Luke Cage strode out of the raging flames unharmed. The C4 bombs and the blazing flames had done no harm to him, but his clothes had been burned away by the heat, revealing his incredibly strong body. Every muscle was like steel, brimming with strength. Seeing this, Jessica tossed him some spare clothes and said unhappily, "Put them on. No one here appreciates your nakedness." Luke Cage took the clothes and smiled innocently. "With all that noise, they should know we're coming," the old man with the stick warned calmly. His aged face was filled with solemnity. "We need to speed up." The old man's voice was steady and powerful, giving everyone a sense of urgency. "Of course, the fun is just beginning." The Punisher's voice was cold and firm. He expertly loaded the powerful 750 Nitro Express shotgun. The heavy weapon stood ready to deliver a devastating blow to his enemies. Below, a massive explosion could be heard from above, followed by a violent tremor in the ground. "They're coming." Madame Gao slowly opened her eyes, a flicker of alarm in her gaze. "I hope your companions are as reliable as you say." Jin leisurely lit his cigar. "They'll go all out for the Dragonbone." Madame Gao's eyes gleamed coldly, her heart brimming with a desire for victory. "By the way, I'll take you out too. All of New York will be mine." Madame Gao mused secretly, her sinister thoughts flickering in her eyes. Kingpin naturally knew what this old woman was thinking, and wasn't he thinking the same thing himself? In this struggle over the Dragonbone, each was waiting for an opportunity, ready to strike a fatal blow. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.